All righty, what is going on? Drive time, Wednesday afternoon, about 13 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. It is kick you in the teeth cold today, about 22 degrees right now, about 12 degrees early this morning. Tried to take the dog out for a walk. He looked at me, he's like, what are you doing? So we went back inside. But hey, happy Wednesday, halfway through that work week, one day closer to the weekend. And as it is every single day, it's going to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. That's Porter Larson. Behind the glass today, the L.A. Lakers are in Salt Lake City. Luka Doncic is expected to play. He was listed as questionable yesterday, but Mark Stein and others have reported today that he is now upgraded to probable. So the Jazz are not the storyline, of course, as history continues to be made. This feels pretty seismic as far as what the Lakers have been able to do, grabbing Luka Doncic. It's a continuation of what the LA Lakers have done for a number of different years, grabbing stars at a premium price and allowing a franchise to be among the championship contenders pretty much year in and year out. So we'll do some NBA basketball on the show today with the Lakers in town to take on the Utah Jazz. University of Utah men's basketball team had a real shot last night. It was actually a pretty good game up until the very end where it escalated quickly. Game was tied at 72 apiece. Cincinnati went on an 11-0 run after that and took an 85-75 win over the Utes. Back in Salt Lake City now, coming up on Saturday against Kansas and then Monday against Kansas State for a couple of Big 12 basketball games for the Utah men who, like I said, had a shot to get that win. Would have been a good win on the road, but went cold down the stretch. Some bad turnovers and some bad closing from the Utes that allowed Cincinnati to take the win. Brigham Young with a quad one win on the road last night in Morgantown, beating West Virginia. A really good college basketball game. Yegor Demon hit a big three and a couple of free throws, and BYU was able to get the win. And as of now, they are one of the last four teams in, according to Joe Lunardi, after getting a quad one win. As the Big 12 season continues to unfold, Utah women taking on Colorado, 7 o'clock tonight. Here in Salt Lake City, the Huntsman Center. So we've got some college basketball on the show today. Of course, we have some NBA basketball on the show today as well. Get you ready for the Jazz game tonight. We'll look back on the NFL season that was and behind us now with the Super Bowl finished. And we'll look at the offseason in pro football. Already a lot of interesting topics. All the coaching vacancies have been filled. We're high speed ahead to the NFL draft. So we'll do some football on the program today as well. Tom Holmoe, after 20 years as the Brigham Young athletic director, had his press conference today. Caught that earlier as I was doing some show prep. I thought Tom was very honest and very forthcoming about the challenges that he faced during his 20 years, and I thought it was a really interesting presser in a lot of different ways. So Tom Holmoe steps aside after 20 years down at BYU, and the nationwide replacement, or I should say the nationwide search for a replacement, is on. As the president of Brigham Young was sitting next to Tom, Shane Reese, and President Reese talked about the process that they will take on now to try to replace what in many ways it has to be a very, very successful 20-year stretch with Tom Holmoe at the helm. So a lot of topics today, a lot of things to get to on the program. Good guest list. Right out of the gates, Mike Yam will stop by from the NFL Network. We'll do some college and pro football with Mike. Neil Smith, excuse me. Something just flew directly in my mouth. That felt like a bug.
Should we?
Nope, we're good. Hold on. Something like, seriously, you ever been on like a four-wheeler, a motorcycle, and you're driving and like a June bug flies in, like Dumb and Dumber style?
I think the amount of times I ride the Jordan River Trail just on my bicycle, I've consumed more bugs than I'd like to count.
Yeah, that was really gross.
We can hit the instant replay.
No, we're good. If you're watching on YouTube, if there is a replay of what just flew directly in my mouth, go ahead and text in. I'm not sure what that was, but man, it hit me right in the back of the throat. Anyway, moving on. So after Mike stops by, we'll bring in Neil Smith for a little Utah Hockey Club, little NHL conversation on the program today. Sean Syed, who was a guest on this show last week and essentially called the Philadelphia Eagle blowout in the Super Bowl. So we'll let Sean come on from Sumer Sports and do a little bit of a victory lap, and we'll talk some offseason NFL on the program today. And then our guy Smitty, Richard Smith, live in studio for the 4 o'clock hour with LeBron James, Luka Doncic, and the LA Lakers in town, and the All-Star break upon us now in just a couple of days. We'll look back on, it's not the first half of the season, but now that we have the All-Star break coming up, Talked to Smitty about what he's seen from the Jazz so far and ultimately what he's hoping to see from these young kids as they move forward now for the final 30-ish games of the season. So Mike Yam, Neil Smith, Sean Syed, Richard Smith, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners, happy Wednesday. And that guy, Porter Larson, who did not have a bug fly into his throat just now. You're a LeBron guy. Is it odd to think that the Lakers are in town and LeBron is not their best player? He's not now. Right now, Luka Doncic is a better player than LeBron James.
Okay.
Nobody would refute that. I'm not talking about their careers. I'm talking about today, right now.
Yeah, no, it's an odd feeling, and I think it's probably for LeBron welcomed at 40 years old. And listen, this is no slight to Dwayne Wade, no slight to Chris Bosh or Kyrie Irving. He's never played with a Luka Doncic, right? A guy like that. And part of that is saying, well, we've never seen a player like Luka. But yeah, man, he does some things that LeBron does really well and kind of replicates them. And for the Lakers, that's got to be welcome when you're trying to maybe limit some of the minutes for a guy that's 40 years old. Hey, why not get a guy that does a lot of the things he can do and might be doing it for the next 10 to 15 years?
Yep, as I've been saying since that trade went down a few weeks ago, the cruel part, if you're an NBA fan and not a Lakers fan, is there's not a player in pro basketball that's better equipped to take over this Laker team than Luka once LeBron retires because they do so many things that are similar. So, Lakers in town tonight, Jazz in action tonight. Our first guest right out of the gates is going to be Mike Yam. But before we get to Mike, courtesy of our friends at Harmon's, Valentine's Day coming up on Friday. It is time now for your opening tip. So don't blow it. Say it with flowers this Valentine's Day with Harmon's Flower Shop. Every arrangement is crafted by a Harmon's floral designer, adding a thoughtful personal touch to your Valentine's gift. Partner with the best growers to bring you fresh, long-lasting flowers to truly impress. Whether you need a last-minute Valentine's surprise or want to plan ahead, Harmon's makes it simple with flower shops in every store and delivery available from our full-service flower shop in West Valley. Classic roses, trendy blooms. Harmon's offers a wide variety of flowers to help you find the perfect arrangement for your special someone. They've got double R ranch beef. You can do a little surf and turf. They've got prime. They've got choice. Wagyu, all available. If you need cooking tips, ask a Harmon's associate. Miss Kavanaugh's chocolate hearts available as well. Made locally in North Salt Lake. Choose from mint, caramel, or peanut butter. If you want a custom heart, just ask a Harmon's Bakery associate. Locations and information online at harmonsgrocery.com. All right, we're going to bring in Mike Yam, but I wanted to talk a little bit real quick, and we'll get back to some of this. I think Smitty will have some thoughts on it. After 20 years, Tom Holmoe has stepped aside as the athletic director down at BYU. The replacement is certainly not yet identified. President Reese, the president of Brigham Young, was sitting by Tom today during their press conference, and he said that they are going to have a national search and then laid out the criteria. You have to, essentially lead with Jesus Christ in mind. It's a faith-based institution. You have to align yourself with the mission of Brigham Young while at the same time leading the athletic department forward into whatever's next. And I think Tom probably did that better than anybody could have expected. It is a challenging task. And I've said oftentimes, both on this show and other shows I've done in the market nearly 20 years now, being the athletic director of BYU, I don't know if it's the hardest job in college athletics, but it is among the hardest jobs. And I thought Tom was very front-facing and forthcoming and honest today during his presser, maybe more so than I'd ever heard him before. And it's always funny when you get the guy that's just retired or you get the guy that's just changed teams, then you get the real deal. Then you actually get the story, right? Now that they're not tied down to actually toe the line and say the things that they're supposed to say every time they do media or every time they're front-facing in public. Among the most interesting things I heard from Tom today during his presser is about 4 or 5 years into the job, 4 or 5 years into, I guess, independence would be the better way to put that. He went home to his wife, Lori, and said, I can't do this. This is too hard. To navigate independence, and I'll continue to say this, to navigate independence, to navigate everything you have to navigate as the athletic director while aligning yourself to the values of a place as unique and as stringent, honestly speaking, as Brigham Young is a remarkable accomplishment that Tom should walk away feeling very proud of. I mean, of every department in the ecosystem of that university, the athletic department is probably the one that does not naturally align itself with the values of a faith-based institution more so than any other department. And that's a tricky dance to dance when you're Tom Holmoe leading that department. And most, if not all, of his hires, he knocked out of the park. Bronco was a great hire. Kalani taking over from Bronco, at times was a little tenuous, and there were questions, but he's settled in now, and obviously he's the right guy for that program. He hired Dave Rose, which probably Dave is the best basketball coach in the history of Brigham Young. He hired Mark Pope, who would still be here if Mark didn't leave for one of the best jobs in all of college basketball, University of Kentucky. I still have some questions about Kevin Young, but the early returns as far as talent acquisition for the basketball program with Kevin in charge have been nothing other than a grand slam. Yegor Demin, Cannon Catchings, 2 NBA players. They probably have some other pros on that roster this year. And then A.J. DeBonsa rolling into town next year as the number 1 recruit in the country under, Kevin Young. You cannot argue with the talent. I do think there are some questions about the coaching, but only time will tell. But ultimately, Tom is a good man. He did a great job down there for what I perceive to be one of, if not the hardest jobs in all of college athletics administration. The athletic director at BYU, man, that's a tough gig. And whoever's next is taking over for a legend, which is always a tough thing. But having the Big 12 landing spot, which I think is the crown jewel achievement of Tom Holmoe's tenure, will allow whoever takes over more of a runway than Tom had. So kind of the biggest story here locally, Tom Holmoe stepping aside from BYU athletic director, that gig that he had for 20 years, and they'll have a replacement in place by late August is what I understand. All right, we'll catch a quick break. Coming up next, we'll do some pro football. We'll talk some Super Bowl. We'll talk some offseason. Mike Yam stops by, move over to Neil Smith, Sean Syed, and Richard Smith. Busy Wednesday show. It's good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. Jazz in action tonight, taking on the LA Lakers. Luka Doncic was initially listed as questionable, but he was upgraded to probable about an hour ago, according to Mark Stein and others. So you will see LeBron, you will see Luka, and, the Jazz will be there too. So we'll get to that game. We'll get you ready for the game tonight, but let's do a little pro football with our guy, Mike Yam, formerly of the Pac-12. That's how we got to know him, and now he's with the NFL Network on a Wednesday afternoon. Mike, happy Wednesday, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. I feel like neither one of us should talk, and we should just fade back up a little Pearl Jam Better Man. I'm okay with that.
Mike, I've long said that FM DJs have the best gig in the world. They come in, they're like, hey, it's 30 degrees outside, and here's Pearl Jam. Then they chill for like 6 or 7 minutes. Unfortunately, what you and I do for a living, we actually have to fill the content, although you're not wrong. All right, let's start with the uncomfortable stuff, which is a question I have for you about my freaking New York Football Jets. So it looks like they are going to move on from Aaron, which I applaud. He is a locker room cancer, and he's not good at football anymore. So what do you make of where we find ourselves with the Jets? What do you think is next? Do you think they're going to bottom out and try to find their way through the draft?
So this is a really big subject, because if there's one team in the NFL where there's a real case study on what to do, what not to do, what direction, if you're thinking about going down, and is it a good idea, bad idea, I will give them a lot of credit in this regard. And you probably would agree with this. They went for it, and they had a really good team a couple years ago that seemed to be deficient on the offensive side. So they said, hey, what's our best option right now? And they went and they signed Aaron Rodgers. And I think there's a couple different ways to look at this. It clearly didn't work out, and it's probably a good thing that both sides are free and clear of this. But I will say this, they did trade for Devontae Adams, right? And were willing to continue even as the wheels were falling off, and they had fired Robert Saleh at that point. They said, hey, let's keep building. Let's keep trying to make a push here. And clearly it wasn't enough. But I think the organization had to say to themselves, this is what Aaron Rodgers does. This is the offense that he brings to the table. He's at a stage in his career 2 years ago where it's like, he wants the guys that are comfortable in that system, understand where they need to be, when they need to be there, and they're not going to make a bunch of play calls. And not to go on a tangent here, I was talking to a colleague of mine at NFL Network, Isaiah Stanback, and he's down in that Dallas area. We were together for the Shrine Bowl a couple weeks ago when the Cowboys decided to go with Schottenheimer. And he turned to me and he said, you know why this is a really good move for Dak? It's because he doesn't have to worry about remaking an entire offense, right? And learning things from scratch. There's some continuity that is going to be in place with Schottenheimer in the fold. And I think the same thing could be said for Aaron Rodgers. They try to make him as comfortable as possible. Look, it didn't work out the first season, gets hurt, obviously a couple snaps into the game. And we're now seeing where if you're coming off an Achilles injury, sometimes you're just not going to look right. Is Kirk Cousins the Kirk Cousins that I saw for most of this year, or is he closer to the one that I saw 2 years ago when he's really healthy? I would argue Kirk's not as bad as what we witnessed there. I just don't think he was healthy. And I think as Aaron Rodgers started to get a little bit healthy as the season went on, he did start to look a little bit better, but a little too late, and they had to go and move on. I feel like I'm not even answering your question here, but it does feel like the Jets have two paths to go. Do we rebuild in this draft? And I don't think that this is a great quarterback class, which is what they need. Do they find that bridge guy and insert him in free agency to sort of piece this thing together? Maybe, but there's a part of me that says, they might just try to pick this thing apart in the draft and rebuild.
Do you think Aaron's done? Do you think that's it for Aaron Rodgers?
No, I don't. I think there's going to be interest because of who he is. And I think we saw enough flashes late in the season where I think there's a team that's maybe he's got a little left here in the tank, and maybe it's good enough to bridge the gap before we go to either a young quarterback or we see what happens in the draft next season. I was talking with Brian Baldinger about this the other day. You look through the top 10, you make an argument 6, 7 of those teams need a quarterback. There's not 6 or 7 first-round arms in this year's draft, and Lord knows there's not 6 top 10 quarterbacks in this year's draft. Last year, what we saw with the run of 6 guys going, those first 12 picks, like that's not going to happen again this year. At least it's not my opinion that that's going to happen. And if that's the case, guys like Aaron Rodgers, I think do find a home. And by the way, do you think he wants to finish out this way? There's a part of me that says, no, like he wants to get back out there.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, and it only takes one general manager to believe that. And your point about going all in to at least give it a shot is very fair. And as a Jets fan who has for years wondered when they would actually do that, I will admit to having some sort of excitement about the endeavor. It just didn't work out. But let's move off the Jets,
Sure.
and that's actually talk about the game that was played, just a few days back now, and 137.7 mil at its peak, and then you add the streaming numbers and the Spanish broadcast numbers. So my first question, Mike, is how has football captured this market share? And do you think we're just in for this ride where because every year it's a new record. It's not going in the wrong direction. Do you think we're on this trajectory where every year we're going to see the audiences grow?
I'm going to say yes, because there's a huge, huge catalyst coming. And in my mind, it's the idea of the international audience and the expansion that is happening and finding different markets in Europe, finding different markets in South America as well. They haven't even come close to tapping the Asian market. Like, I don't even think – I know there's an effort and there's a lot of progress that's being made behind the scenes, but can you imagine – globally, because we talk about the NFL, at least in headquarters, as a global sport. And I think there's a real argument for it when you talk about these games that are selling out in Munich and Brazil, and obviously we're going to game in Ireland right now. Like, that's all great. But they haven't even come close to tapping that market. Like, I haven't heard the conversations about a game in Japan or China or insert, an Asian country. So I think that there's still a ridiculous amount of legs for this sport. You think about flag football being included into the Olympics. I think there's a lot to be said where that audience is going to continue to grow, which is mind-boggling to me.
So I don't love the whole, what does one loss mean for a player's legacy? But I do want to ask you about the winning quarterback instead of leading the conversation with the Chiefs and Mahomes, because and look, I am no NFL scout, and I am comfortable being an observer and having an informed opinion because I've been doing this for a long time, but I'm not some expert. I just was never on board with the conversation about Jalen. I just wasn't. It felt like they were intentionally rushing the football because they had a great offensive line and they have probably the best running back of this generation. And a couple years ago in the Super Bowl, Jalen passed for over 300. He can throw the football. And yes, I know there's some numbers to be critical of and maybe the lack of accuracy from time to time. And he might have the best 1-2 punch as far as receivers in the entire NFL. But I always believed that at some point that this dude was going to get it done. I've been a fan of his way back in Bama when he lost his job and stayed in college and stayed the course. What did this win do for the narrative surrounding Jalen Hurts?
I think it changes it dramatically, and I think you're hitting the nail on the head, and it was something that was bothering me. I do a new podcast with Lamar Hurd, who I know is a buddy of yours and has probably been on the show a million times, and we were talking about it last night, actually, on the episode. And I had said to him, I got to the point where I was really disappointed with, and it's partly my fault too, right? I could have spoken up on the 5-hour Super Bowl live show that I did last week, right? You're doing all this coverage, and I'm thinking to myself, I get the low-hanging fruit of legacy with Mahomes and going for a three-peat and the Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce situation. But there was one point, Spence, during the week, I was working with David Carr, and in one of our commercial breaks, I turned to him and I just said, do you see it the way that I see it? And he looked at me and he's like, where are you going with this? And I said, I see a world where the Chiefs win small. For sure, they can win this game. I mean, look at the season, look at the team, look at Mahomes. Of course they can win the Super Bowl. But I see it where the Eagles can win a close game. But I got to tell you, I also see the Eagles smashing this team. And I don't see Kansas City being able to say the same thing. And he started to laugh and he said, I've been thinking the same thing. And I go, I'm not going to say that on air just because I'm the host, right? He's the analyst. And he did pick Philadelphia in that game. He didn't think it was going to be a wrecking ball the way that he didn't say it was going to be a wrecking ball the way that it turned out. But as Jalen Hurts is on that podium, Spence, I start thinking to myself, why not the Eagles being the new dynasty. And I'm not suggesting Kansas City is going away. All I'm saying is Jalen Hurts is young, right? So they got a guy who's in place who 2 years ago was in the MVP conversation. They lose both their coordinators 2 seasons ago off of that loss, and it was a bad year for Nick Sirianni. He was on the hot seat. People were talking about this losing his job. Now he's a Super Bowl winner. They get Saquon Barkley. They got a young defense. Like, think about what Kansas City has done. They've built around Mahomes. Philly's got Jalen Hurts. They got skill position players that are in the fold. Kansas City kind of lost some of those dudes. But the reason why the Chiefs were in this game is because of their defense, Spence, and what they've done in this draft. Look at what Howie Roseman's done, their general manager, the Eagles GM. Like, he's starting to build a team that's got young studs on the defensive side, on the front half of that, in that front seven, and in the back end. I just look at that and go, hey, Philly I don't think is going anywhere. And maybe I'm just being dramatic because they're coming off this Super Bowl win. But I really do think the framework is there for this team.
And that's where I wanted to go next. And I know you got to go in a minute, so I have one Kansas City question for you.
No, I got a couple. I got a couple. So whatever you need.
Okay, cool.
I just got a text that a meeting got canceled. So.
Oh, cool. Okay, great. More Mike Yam is better for us. So, we talk a lot about, Mahomes 29, Josh Allen, Lamar 28, Jalen's 26, and Saquon's 28, AJ's 27, Devontae's 26. I mean, look. When you win at a high level, you are going to lose coaches, which they have again, and there are going to be players that need to get paid. So they're not going to run it back entirely, but the bulk of their team is in place, and they are young. What are you willing to say about what is now possible after watching them just dismantle this modern-day dynasty in Kansas City?
So do I think they can get back and win another Super Bowl in the next 2 to 3 seasons? Yes, I absolutely do think that is the case. We and you and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I've been on with you enough to know kind of like we think similarly in terms of some of the personnel and some of the teams that are out there. Like, I don't think this is going, a hot take. Like, the AFC has got better teams collectively. But if you said to me, who are the most complete teams in the NFL, 2 of them are in the NFC and 1 is in the AFC, and that's the Baltimore Ravens. And then I would throw the Lions in with the Eagles. And it's not to say that Kansas City is not good. It's not to say Buffalo is not good or, the Houston Texans on the rise, whoever, what Washington's going to end up being in the next couple seasons. I just think right now, based off of those rosters, those 3 teams to me are the most complete. And if you got the most complete teams, I think you got a chance at the end. And to me, that's why I think Philadelphia, because of some of those ages that you referenced, and because they have a general manager willing to wheel and deal to get this team to this point. Like, the Eagles always seem to be active, always seem to pull the right strings, and it's usually not a train wreck. Like, they don't have like these god awful, seasons where you just shake your head and go, "What the heck happened?" Like, maybe they don't live up to the hype, but that's why I really do think like the Eagles absolutely are in the next couple seasons.
All right, now let's move over to the Chiefs side of this. And, I don't know where you were at while you were watching the game. I was shell-shocked. I thought Kansas City was going to win a close one because I just got sick of – I thought it was Josh's year. You just get sick of picking against Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. So, but actually, before we get to the Chiefs question, at what point during the game, Mike, did you say to yourself, all right, that's it, that's a wrap?
So D-Hop's drop made me think to myself, like, this just might not be it. And obviously at the end of the first quarter, Patrick's eyes, God, I sound like so dramatic, dude. Like, I don't mean to be that guy, but they're like, am I the only one who saw that? Like, you're sitting there and you're seeing Mahomes kind of run around, and you have flashes of the Todd Bowles defense in a huge game like the Super Bowl, just like the dude's head was on a swivel. And you look at the tackles on that offensive line, and they weren't holding up, and they weren't holding up even when Philly wasn't blitzing. I think I saw this. God, you would think I would have gone through our post-game research packet like 800 times, but I'm almost positive that Philly did not blitz in that game and still was able to generate that much pressure. So when I see Mahomes have that type of look, that's at that point I was like, oh, like this ain't going to be good for these dudes.
Yeah, no, you're right. And he was seeing ghosts. And that's what happens where every time you drop back, you're running for your life. I mean, I don't really view this. And I'm not I don't think wins and losses are a quarterback stat. That's just me. I mean, we kind of do the thing like Mahomes was 8-0 against Vic Fangio prior to the Super Bowl. But moving over to the Kansas City side, I mean, Andy Reid's coming back next year. Mahomes is still in his 20s. We'll see what happens with Kelsey. This does feel a little bit like the diagnosis we all did after the Tampa Bay Super Bowl loss, where they couldn't protect Mahomes at all. They obviously have offensive line issues, but they're among the favorites in some sports books, the favorite to win it again next year because they have 15 under center. What does the offseason look like? And do you anticipate a recalibration and maybe a second or third act with this Kansas City Chiefs team?
Look, I think they're going to be in the mix again next year because of the Mahomes factor, right? And I think it's even more magnified to me. Some people might say, hey, that's a lazy take. But my pushback on it would be, think about what Mahomes was able to accomplish this year when there were clearly flaws on that team. And I think they were magnified in the Super Bowl. And I think the one thing that Brett Veach is needing to sort of figure out here in the next couple of weeks ahead of the draft is, how do I fill some of these gaps? And there were gaps on that offensive line. People felt like the shift with Joe Thuney on that offensive line, moving him to left tackle, was going to be enough. And for 8 weeks or so, it was. But I think we forgot what the first half of the season looked like for Mahomes. Interceptions were piling up, sacks were piling up for him, and there was an unsteady nature around this offense. I think clearly they need a playmaker on that outside to go along with an Xavier Worthy. D-Hop, unfortunately, wasn't that guy. They had to deal with injuries with Hollywood Brown. They need to figure out that backfield. Pacheco was banged up. They just never really got that production. But first and foremost is, how do you solidify an offensive line in front of Patrick Mahomes? And then how do you add some depth and some pieces on the offensive side? And more importantly, because it's the defense that's carried them these last 2 years, how do you make sure you're in a good spot? So I think, in a particular order, offensive line's got to be like first, second, and third. And then it's another playmaker, whether it's a running back or a wide receiver. And we got to add some depth to that defense.
All right, a couple of other just questions around the league, then I'll set you loose. And if you need to hang up on me, Mike, you can, and my feelings won't be hurt. So
I'm good. They just I know I told Porter that I had an out time, but they shifted my meeting. So I'm good for a few minutes, whatever you need.
Okay, great. Because I did want to ask you, Jaden Daniels was nearly a Ute, and then he ended up down at Arizona State, and you were with the network, and we had him in the Pac-12 footprint, and I remember watching him and being like, yeah, he's fun. Yeah, he's exciting. But come on, man. Nobody saw this. And I've got a buddy who's a Commanders fan, and we kind of bemoan our football misery with me being the Jets fan and him being the Commanders fan. And if you're a Commanders fan, now they've got some work to do because he was so good. I think he was able to cover up some real holes that Philly exposed. So what do they do this offseason to make sure they do not waste who clearly is a generational talent? And attendant to that, how surprised are you to watch this kid do what he's doing based off the fact that you saw the start of his college career?
Spence, I was at his first start against Kent State.
Yeah.
That was a game that was on Pac-12 Network. We were doing our road show there. He was the first, true freshman to get a start at the quarterback spot for ASU. And he played, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I know he threw maybe 2 touchdowns in that game, and he looked good. And it's funny, this time last year, as he's getting ready for the draft, Michael Robinson, one of my buds and colleagues in NFL, kept telling me, he's like, yo, man, I think I might like him better than Caleb. And it was so hard for me to boot the skinny, thin kid who, by the way, goes to LSU and has Heisman. It's not like I didn't see him play really well in his last stop, but it's hard sometimes to boot those early perceptions that you have of a guy. He's been terrific. He's the reason why people watch the draft. He's the reason why there are, a bunch of teams in the top 10 who feel like they are just one player away from changing the fortunes of an entire franchise. And it's not to say that Caleb's not going to be good, but we saw Bo Nix have some great flashes for a Denver team that we didn't think was going to be able to play as well as they did. Kudos to Sean Payton in that regard as well. The only pushback, and by the way, I'm not the only one saying this, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but C.J. Stroud took a little bit of a step back, I thought, this past season. And how do you ensure that that's not the case for Jaden Daniels? I don't know what I would point to other than I think some teams figured out how to make CJ a little uncomfortable. They had some real injuries that they needed to navigate, and I thought that was a factor. They were rushing him. Defenses, I felt like he was under more pressure this season than he was in his rookie campaign. But it feels like Jaden's got a slightly different skill set because of his mobility, what he does with his legs, where he might be able to negate some of that stuff and be just as good, if not better, in year two.
So you referenced Caleb, and it's interesting. There are a lot of people that have dissenting opinions on who he can be, and I like him. I think there's a lot there. I know that some people don't love the perceived prima donna stuff or whatever. I don't know, man. I think we saw a lot during his rookie year that indicated that he was getting better, and now they bring in Ben Johnson. And I don't know, Mike, it's interesting. I've never been one to, like Nick Sirianni, his opening press conference made us all cringe, and we're like, is this dude okay? And he just won a Super Bowl. There just isn't anything about Ben's personality that I've seen so far that makes me believe he's like a Dan Campbell culture builder, but maybe you don't have to be because he's so brilliant offensively. How does this look now that Chicago has an offensive-minded coach for a young quarterback who I still believe can be really special?
Huge in such a meaningful way. I'm with you, and I think the people that I've talked to around, that team, that franchise, or at least know Ben, I think that's part of the concern, right? Like, can Ben get in a room and own it the way Dan Campbell can? And by the way, he doesn't need to be Dan Campbell. There's plenty of different personalities that are out there. By and large, I think there's so much optimism around getting an offensive guy who can really work and mold the guy that I thought was a generational type talent coming out of school in Caleb Williams. And I would give this context too. Jared Goff was almost left for dead, and I couldn't be happier that this guy is balled out the way that he has. They've had some great pieces in Detroit around him, but Ben was able to get the best out of Jared Goff. And now I think, hey, you got a guy like Caleb Williams, and there are pieces to that offense that are pretty talented. Can you get this team over the hump? And there's a part of me that says, they're one of those squads who, I thought they'd be good this year. Obviously, there were some real struggles for them, and the wheels fell off for them. But I do think next year I would point to them as a team that would be one of the more dangerous ones.
Let me ask you about another Pac-12 kid, because as a Jets fan, I actually thought the Jets had found their future when they drafted Sam Darnold. It did not work out, and maybe that's a Jets problem. I'm sure Zach Wilson's family on line 2 has something to add to that. But I was very happy for Sam to see what he did in Minnesota this year, although it didn't end the way he was expecting. It feels like he's earned a shot somewhere. Yeah, where do you think that is?
I think the Raiders potentially are a good fit. I know there's a lot of people pointing to Russell Wilson in that regard. I'm with you on Sam. I made reference to this. I said this the other day about Saquon, and someone hit me up on social media, and I'm like, oh, my God, like, you guys are so technical. I talked about how – remember that Rose Bowl? I said a couple years ago, it was 2018, sorry, my frame of reference sometimes, like, I don't realize that I'm getting old and I'm 43 now. And, 2018 wasn't just 2 years ago. I'd also argue college doesn't seem that long ago. But, you remember that Penn State matchup
Sure.
against SC.
Sure, yeah.
And, just kind of like the head-to-head stuff. And there was so much buzz around Sam. And I know it didn't play out great for him in his NFL career, but this resurgence has been remarkable. And I do think that while the ending was not great for Sam, Kevin O'Connell and like the position he was in, at least in that last game, raised a couple eyebrows for a few of us at NFL Network as we were doing some of our shows around it. It felt like there weren't like a ton of great adjustments in that game in that second half, and Sam obviously struggled. But Sam deserves another opportunity. I think he gets it. And, do I think he gets like a $40 million, deal somewhere? I don't know if that's the case, but, 3 weeks left in the season, it was looking like that. I don't know what he ends up getting, but the Raiders certainly look like a team that could be one of those squads that would do well with him.
I didn't mean to make this a trip around nostalgic Pac-12 questions, but I have one more question for you before I set you loose, because we are in a market where we have a lot of Broncos fans. And I was on the sidelines when Bo Nix rolled into town with the Oregon Ducks, and they just dismantled the Utes. But I was pretty skeptical about Bo's potential to play NFL football at a high level, and I think he answered a lot of questions. So I'm going to ask you the same question before I set you loose that I asked you about Washington. I'm going to ask you about Denver. What do they need to do to make sure that this momentum continues to roll and make sure Bo's ready to go for year two?
I don't think you're alone in your assessment and what you thought it was going to be. And I think the two of us are sitting here doing a double take, like, damn, they played that well. Bo balled out like that. I do think another playmaker is solidifying that defense with some depth around there. There were times as I watched this team and I just wondered, like, hey, like, what would they be with one of the more talented running backs in the NFL? It did feel like Bo was under a lot of pressure to deliver. And by the way, he did. Jaden doesn't have Jaden season. Bo Nix is the guy. I mean, it's sort of the same conversation, which is how good can Washington be? How good could Denver be? Well, it turns out pretty damn good. And while people wanted to see Cincinnati sneak into the postseason, it was Denver grabbing that last spot. And kudos to that team for having that type of season. But to me, I really do think another playmaker, and I know he had to get to play with his college buddy in Franklin, but I do think there needs to be more of a concerted effort on the offensive side to build around Bo.
Mike, before I set you loose, what is going on? Follow back? I just followed you again on Twitter. That's so weird. I just pulled up your Twitter page. It said follow back. I've been following you for like 5 years. I don't know what the deal is. Anyway, Twitter's weird. I don't know if you've been following the news cycle about the dude that seems to own the company, but it's kind of a weird spot for social media right now. I know they call it X, but before I set you loose, Fried Rice and Marinara, you've written a children's book, and you also have a new podcast. So tell our listeners where they can go get your work.
No, I appreciate it. By the way, like, I don't even follow the guy who owns – I don't want to make this political deal, but, like, It's almost like I'm on his timeline. Like, it's kind of crazy to me, which is just wild. Anyway, appreciate as always, man. You mentioned it in the book. It's certainly a huge passion project for me. Fried Rice and Marinara. It is on Amazon. If anyone is purchasing, a review would be amazing. I do have another one coming out at the end of the year. I was just corresponding with some folks about that. Got some football ties on that one. And then All Ball with Lamar Hurd, one of my best friends from my days at Pac-12, was obviously the TV analyst for the Blazers. We're doing a little West Coast. We're doing some NFL. We're doing a little NBA conversation. It airs on the Pac-12 Conference's YouTube page, and you can listen to it as well. So I appreciate you immensely, man, even just bringing that up.
Always good to hear your voice, my friend. Be well. We'll chat soon, okay?
You're the best, man. Take care.
All right, the great Mike Yam. We got to know him when the Pac-12 was a thing, kids. Look it up, YouTube. And now he's with our friends at the NFL. Always appreciate Mike's time. Well, before we catch a break, got to tell you about my friends at Prize Picks, which is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. All you have to do is pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. All-Star Weekend's almost here. Prize Picks is the best place to win cash while watching your favorite players during the game during the game and the Saturday night events like the three-point contest or the dunk contest as well. If you have not taken their free money, you might as well go do that and then play around and see if you like it. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 and get $50 instantly when you play just $5. Promo code ESPN700 on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly. When you play just $5, win or lose, you're going to get $50 for just playing. That's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game all season long. All right, we got 1 hour down. We got 3 hours to go. We'll do a little puck coming up next. Neil Smith stops by for his weekly hit. Latest on the Utah Hockey Club, Sean Syed for some more pro football. Then Smitty live in studio for an entire hour. We'll get you ready for the Jazz-Lakers game. Busy Wednesday show. Good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. little bit of breaking news, only because we've been covering this story quite a bit. The Department of Education has rescinded it was not a ruling. It was just a memo sent around by the Department of Education prior to Joe Biden leaving the White House and Donald Trump taking over, that NIL would be under Title IX guidelines, and that has been rescinded. We'll get back to it because there is some storylines applicable to our local scene here. We're also going to bring in Richard Smith. Neil Smith's on the phone. We're bringing him in right now, but Richard Smith live in studio to get you ready for Jazz Lakers, Sean Syed for some NFL. But the aforementioned Neil Smith stops by for our weekly conversation about the world of professional hockey. Neil, happy Wednesday, sir. How are you?
Happy Wednesday to you. And there's too many Smiths. I mean, how do you keep them all straight?
Well, especially in our state. Smith is a very popular name in the state of Utah, Neil. So we've got Neil Smith, former NHL executive now. Richard Smith spent 40 years with the Jazz front office. I got to know, are you a Super Bowl guy? I know you're a hockey guy. Did you?
Not really. You know what, Spence? I was driving 11 and a half hours on Sunday to go from New York back home to South Carolina. So the roads were quite good because most people that have a life were watching the Super Bowl, but I was behind the wheel of a car.
Okay. All right. Are you all hockey? Do you take in any basketball or anything else, or is it just all hockey for you?
You know, don't tell your dad that I don't watch basketball. No, I mean, when I was at the Garden, I used to love the Knicks, and I really do appreciate the athleticism of basketball. Boy, when you sit courtside and see those guys, it's unbelievable. And baseball, I love. I don't know who could grow up in North America and not sort of like baseball, because it's the American game, and it's so easy to go to a game and just enjoy yourself. You don't need to really know the score. You just go and enjoy the day. So. But I mostly, grew up in Canada. I'm a Canuck. I'm all hockey all the time.
No, fair enough. Well, it's good that you're all hockey all the time because you are our hockey expert. So we need your knowledge. So Four Nations face-off. I know it's not something that moves the needle for you, but it does allow a little bit of a respite, a little bit of a reset, right? This time of year where the hockey clubs offer another number of days. So what do you think the boxes are that need to be checked around NHL front offices with this break? Are you using it to get healthy? Are you looking at your roster maybe to make some moves? What does this pause in action do for the world of the NHL, Neil?
Well, first of all, I think that the general managers that have players playing in the tournament are doing a lot of praying every night that their players don't get hurt, because these are their best players.
Yeah.
And the one team who's actually up at the top of the league that has nobody playing in the tournament is Washington. It's amazing. So Chris Patrick, the GM, and Spencer Carberry, the coach, they're relieved. They go on vacation and they can just enjoy watching the Four Nations. But the other GMs, I can tell you, are just sitting there praying that their guys don't get hurt. I think for the GMs that aren't involved, it's all of the above. It's what you said. They're looking to see who they should add. Are they a seller? Are they a buyer? Where have they got a realistic chance? And they're evaluating their lineup, and they're evaluating their injuries. And this is a great break for a player who's got a nagging injury to get a couple of 10 days to 2 weeks off to rest and heal.
So, as we sit here now, only 26 games left for the Utah Hockey Club, which honestly, as I'm saying that out loud, that is wild. It feels like they just landed in our market. So, I wanted to do a little bit of kind of a reset and a look back on the 56 games that have been played here for the Utah Hockey Club. And honestly, I'll give you a lot of credit because they are in a spot where you told us you thought they would be. They are right there for the wild card. They're 6 points back of Vancouver. They're a full 11 back of Colorado, but they're right where you told us you thought they would be as we are now sitting here in February, and down the stretch we go. So before we look forward, let's look back on the 56 games that have been played, the good, the bad, your thoughts on the hockey club as we sit here right now.
Well, my good friend and partner on my podcast, Vic Morin, made up a great chart for me that we're going to use on the podcast, showing all the teams and how many games they have left, how many home games, how many games against over 500 teams, how many games against sub 500 teams, playoff teams and non-playoff teams, and it really gives you a great picture. I'll tell you, with a quick statement about Utah, and you and I have talked about this all year. 9, 12, and 6 at home is really not going to do it. I mean, they only have 9 wins at home. That's 2 less than Vancouver has at home. That's 7 less than Calgary has at home. 3 less than St. Louis has at home, and it's 4 less than Anaheim Ducks have at home. So, if they were just 500, if they were 12, if they were 12 and 3, that's a big deal. That's an extra 3 points that they would have in the standings, which would put them even closer. So, being not good on home ice, which is the opposite of where they were at Mullet Arena back in Arizona, has really cost them this season.
I know I've asked you this, but let's dig into a little bit more because there are a couple of things that I've noticed they really struggle with. And obviously the home ice and inability to capture maximum points here in Salt Lake is a big problem. They also don't close, Neil. They went through this stretch where I think it was 13 straight games. They were either tied or leading heading into the third period. And I think they had 3 or 4 wins during that 13-game stretch. What gives it? Is it, okay, a new market? It's not an expansion team, but it is a new home for these coaches and players and the staff. Is it youth? Is it inexperience? Like the inability to get points at home and close out. What does that say to you?
What that says to me is that it's a young group and they're a nervous group once the other team scores. They come out early in the games and do quite well. They're fast. They're score. I mean, look at their last game in Washington. They got a big lead on the best team in the league, and then they were able to come back and tie him in the last seconds of the game, and then Utah went on to win in the shootout. But they start what we call squeezing your stick tighter, meaning that you get all nervous, like, oh, my God, here we go again. Are we going to lose again? We can't lose again. We can't lose again. That's what happens to an inexperienced team. An experienced team goes up 2-0, goes up 3-0, gets a goal scored on them. They go, so what? An inexperienced team is so happy that they've got the lead, and then the other team scores, and they go, "Oh my God, no! Please, don't do this again." So it's just a maturation process. And yeah, you're right. This is not an expansion team; it's an established team, but it's a young team, and they're going to have to get experience in how to handle and protect a lead.
You reference, general managers and front offices utilizing this little break to kind of look around. The trade deadline is March 7th, Neil, is that right? First, second week of March, something like that?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so Bill Armstrong right now taking this opportunity to analyze his group. And as you and I have discussed all year, this is a club with clean books and draft capital. Should they want to make an addition to expedite the growth, they have the ability to do that. Now, Bill has also talked on the record oftentimes about this process and how they've been implementing the process for a number of years. They're not going to stray from it. We had a general manager here named Dennis Lindsay from the Jazz who always said, we will not skip steps. We are going to do this the hard way. We're going to learn our lessons and we're going to grow. But just generally speaking, what sort of conversations do you think Bill and his staff are having about the potential of adding to the group for the stretch run?
In all honesty, and I don't want to throw water on a playoff run, but I think that where they'll be right now is they'll be talking about whether or not they can get anything back to add to this group for the future. I don't think they'll be talking about trying to go out and get something to fortify them for this little last run here because time is running out quickly. As you said, they got 26 games to go, 14 at home, 12 on the road. It's not going to be easy at this point. And Vancouver is the odds-on favorite to get into the playoffs. And remember, they were a really good team last year. This year, they've hit a lot of different self-inflicted roadblocks. But I think, the GM Armstrong and his staff should be, they should be moderately happy about this season. They've come into the market. They've had a decent year. They've kept themselves in the fight all the time. And I'm not saying Spencer out of the fight now. They should keep fighting right till the deadline comes when they've got to make that buyer-seller decision. But I would think that they're sitting around saying, what can we do to get a draft picks or young assets so that our team is fortified again for the next year and beyond?
I know I've talked to you about the goaltending situation, but it just the numbers say Vejmelka is the guy. The data says he is the guy, and Ingram was hurt for a while, and then he came back, and they're kind of doing the thing where they're rotating based off of what that game needs, based off of what the night needs. But if I guess the way I'll pose the question, like if they found a way to make it into the postseason, where it's like, all right, we have to have our best players on the ice. Do you think Coach Torney simply goes Vejmelka based off the numbers, or because Connor was the, kind of the guy a year ago and he was the incumbent to win the job? Do you think he looks at potentially Connor? Because all of the data indicates Vejmelka has been the better goaltender all year long. If they made the postseason, who do you think would be there in goal?
I think Vejmelka, just on what you said, because coaches are going to go on the numbers, and I also think that Vejmelka is going to be the guy they're going to turn to when they play the two games that they've got left against Vancouver, and the important games like beating Calgary, beating St. Louis, beating Anaheim. In the games they've got remaining, that's when you want to have your best out there, and I think Vejmelka has been the best. Now, having said that, here is a question for Bill Armstrong. Vejmelka is a unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. So do they get him signed and make sure that he's coming back to Utah? Or do they see if anybody needs a real good backup that's going into the playoffs that maybe has got an injury to their backup or maybe has a problem? You're not going to trade him as a number one going into the playoffs, but you might be able to find a team that needs a real quality backup. Do they move him, or do they sign him and keep him in Utah? That's something I certainly can't answer, but I do know he has played. He's been the best goaltender this year, in my opinion, and I think he has. He's an unrestricted guy, so they got to decide what is the future for Carroll.
Curious as to moving away from Utah Hockey Club as we have this trade deadline now, still a few weeks away. Which teams, Neil, are you hearing that would be active, and which players do you think are available that could be moved prior to that March deadline that actually could change the scope of the league?
I don't think it's hard to figure out who's going to be active when the deadline comes, coming up to the deadline, because it's always the best teams that are going to be the most active and take the biggest swing of the bat at the plate because they've got a chance to win it. And so I would think that the Washington Capitals and the Winnipeg Jets are going to try to fortify what they've got, which means that they could go, for example, and we're talking Utah, so let's look at Utah. They could come to Utah and say, Bukestad, do you have any interest in, what do I got to give you to Bukestad? Or what have I got to give you for Kerfoot? Those are two guys that Utah has as unrestricted free agents at the end of this season. So that's where those top teams and the playoff teams will be trying to fortify for this run right now. I mean, maybe if Bortuzzo comes off the IR, he's a guy that won a Stanley Cup with St. Louis back in 2018. Maybe he'd be a guy that someone would want as a depth defenseman because you can never have enough when the playoffs start. But that's what the teams that are in the mix are going to be looking to add. The teams that aren't in the mix are obviously looking to get whatever they can for their UFAs.
All right, I have a little fun question I want to end with, but before we get there, I'm going to ask you, if you had to pick right now in the East and the West, your two favorite teams to advance and play for the Stanley Cup, one team from the East, one team from the West, and why?
Oh, boy. Well, from the West, I'm going to say Winnipeg, only because they've had this unbelievable year. And last year they got knocked out early, and I think they've learned from that. They've got the best goalie in the league. So I'll take Winnipeg in the West, even though Edmonton's a great team, and we all know that, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and all that. And in the East, I'm going to go back to Florida. Even though Washington's had this great year, I think Florida is a veteran team. They've been there. They know how to get there. I'd say it's going to come down to between Washington and Florida. And at the end of the day, I think Florida would win that last round. But that's splitting hairs. It's going to be one of those two, I think, against Winnipeg.
All right, moving over to the question I wanted to kind of kick the tires with you on before I set you loose on a Wednesday. The Lakers are in town. Luka Doncic, I can't believe I'm saying that, but Luka Doncic, LeBron James on the same team. The Lakers are in town. And the general manager of the Dallas Mavericks is under a tremendous amount of heat after moving on from a generational player at the age of 25. I wanted to know, Neil, what one transaction that you made as a roster constructor in the NHL, which one transaction gave you the most anxiety? Like, there's a lot riding on this, and you decided to go with it anyway because your gut told you to do it. Is there one that comes to mind?
I would say the one that was the one that was the most gave me the most anxiety, gave me the best results, and that was trading for Mark Messier back in '91, who was a generational player who won 6 Stanley Cups, but I did trade 2 young players and Bernie Nichols, who was a 70-goal scorer for the LA Kings at one time, to Edmonton, and I trusted that Mark still had it at his age to lead us and to get us there. And boy, did he ever. I mean, he did more than I would ever have hoped for. But it did, when you talk about that feeling that you get when you push the button on a big trade and you know if it doesn't work, guess who's going to get their head cut off? It's going to be you. I mean, that's the one that probably caused me the most anxiety.
And that one worked out just fine, Neil. There's no doubt about that. Before I set you loose, and it may be the answer to this question may include the player you just alluded to, the best duo all time, 2 players playing together in NHL history, because we have Luka and LeBron tonight. Best duo, and you can give us a couple of examples. I mean, there are a lot of options here, but in your opinion, the best duo who played together in the history of pro hockey.
I guess I got to say Gretzky and Messier in Edmonton.
Yep.
You know, they won 4 Stanley Cups together. I'm sure there were guys on the Islanders who won 4 Stanley Cups when you win Trottier and Potvin and Bossy and those guys, and then great Montreal teams that won 4 in a row at the very end of the 70s there with Lafleur and the great defense they had and Ken Dryden in net. There's a lot. There's a lot there. Bobby Orr and Phil Esposito in the early 70s when they won 2 cups for Boston. There's been quite a few. You know, we have more players that are active during a game in hockey than you do in basketball. So 2 star players in basketball is probably like 4 star players in hockey because, you know, we're going on and off the ice a lot more than the basketball players are.
All right, Neil, where can our new hockey listeners in our hockey market find that podcast of yours?
Well, you can find it on any podcast platform, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube. If you want to look at us, you can every edition of our show is on YouTube, and everyone is on our website, which is NHLWraparound.com. I hope the good folks of Salt Lake will give it a try and subscribe and like it and all that good stuff. And I got to tell you, it's been fun doing this all season. I'm really looking forward to going forward with it.
Neil, thank you, sir, for the time. Have a great week ahead, and we will get you on soon.
Yep. Thank you, Spence.
All right. The great Neil Smith, general manager back in the day of the Rangers, the Islanders, spent a number of years with the Red Wings as well. Got a great podcast. NHLWraparound.com is where you find it. Yeah, I was kicking the tires on that earlier. Best duo in the history of the NHL. I think Neil probably nailed it. The Edmonton years with Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier. Of course, LeBron James, Luka Doncic in town to take on the Jazz tonight. We're going to get you ready for that game with Richard Smith. But coming up on the other side, Sean Syed will join us from Sumer Sports. Sean called the Super Bowl. He wasn't on the call. That was Tom Brady. Sean predicted that the Eagles would smoke the Chiefs, so we're going to bring him in and talk about that and do a little football. But time now for your chance to win tickets to see Earth, Wind, and Fire. ESPN 700 welcomes Earth, Wind, and Fire to the Maverick Center June the 16th. Tickets are on sale now. Join me. Join me there for your chance to win a pair of tickets. I didn't know I was going, but hey, it would be really fun to hang out with you guys June the 16th. Earth, Wind, and Fire tickets. Text in right now, 877-353-0700. Just tell me your favorite Earth, Wind, and Fire song. Porter will give you tickets to see Earth, Wind, and Fire coming up in the Maverick Center June the 16th. All right, Sean Syed joins us coming up next to talk some pro football. Richard Smith is live in studio for some NBA and some jazz. And we'll say goodnight at 6 o'clock on this chilly. Man, it is cold outside. It's good to have you along for the ride right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. LA Lakers are in town tonight to take on the Utah Jazz. Luka Doncic will play. He was listed as questionable yesterday, upgraded to probable about 2 hours ago or so. So Jazz Lakers tonight, LeBron James in town, Luka Doncic in town, and the Jazz will be there too. But obviously the storyline certainly is with the Lakers side of things, but we'll do some pro football now. Friend of the show joined us last week prior to the Super Bowl, and now I'm bringing him on to brag. Sean Syed, Sumer Sports. Sean, happy Wednesday, buddy. How are you?
It feels good. You know, it's not just about being right. It's about the process. It's about the analysis. I do feel good about, having come on the show, predicted that Eagles win. Certainly, I think a little bit different than most people would have expected in terms of how it looked, but for me, it was still a fun game. I'm not sure if it was for you.
Well, certainly you called it, and I wanted to bring you on to kind of reflect on exactly what you saw and then talk about the game, how it unfolded, and whether or not it kind of went into lockstep with what you were expecting.
It did in terms of the way that the Eagles defense approached the Kansas City Chiefs, where the Eagles defensive plan, it was not particularly complicated. We're going to play a bunch of zone coverage. We're going to make you make the right decision over and over again, just rush 4 guys, send 0 total blitzes the entire game. I mean, that is Vic Fangio, the defensive coordinator's approach to games in general. So I could feel, how that was. What I didn't expect was, a really nice Zach Bond interception, that pick 6 from Cooper DeJean, where you're making a play that, Mahomes is throwing that ball because you have no business being in that spot, just based on how everything played out. So I thought it was an excellent example of the Eagles really, really just hitting the highest level of their peak, where they got their best defensive line play this entire season. Josh Sweat may have played the best game of his career, so I'm not going to pretend like I would have predicted all of that. I'm not going to pretend like I would have predicted the final score in that game, but the way the Eagles came in, it is what we talked about last week in kind of how they approached the Chiefs.
At what point, I've been asking all of my NFL guests so far this week the same question. When did you, and again, I know you predicted Philly was going to win the thing, but while you were watching the game, at what point did you say, okay, that's a wrap, they're not coming back?
So I think that when I started to get the thoughts, honestly, it wasn't until after the, kind of middle-ish of the third quarter, because you go into the half 24-0, and it's really, really hard to come back from that, but Mahomes has literally done that before against the Texans a few years back, so I didn't want to count it out. But you could start to feel it pretty early on. The first third down where the Eagles are making it really hard on the Chiefs. Cooper DeJean is being super physical, kind of pushing around Travis Kelce a little bit. You can start to feel it. You can start to see it. You see, even when Saquon Barkley is not breaking off big runs, Jalen Hurts just getting rid of the ball, playing super comfortable, playing on time. Start to feel, but look, I'm not going to. In the back of my mind, I need to see 0-0, to count Patrick Mahomes out. So really, it was once you got in that middle of the third quarter, after that Devontae Smith touchdown, I was like, all right, I don't need to be silly anymore. There's no way these guys are going to be able to come back.
So I know you've already touched on the defensive game plan schematically from Vic Fangio prior to Sunday, as you and I talked about last week. Patrick Mahomes 8-0 against Vic Fangio. So let's dig a little bit deeper. Did Vic Fangio do anything different this time around? Or was it just kind of the classic schematic attack that he always likes to implement, but he has the horses now, and Kansas City couldn't keep up?
So it was a little bit of, some stuff was the same, some stuff was different. They play a little bit of a different coverage. They really, prioritize having multiple people watching Travis Kelce, even if they're not in a dedicated kind of bracket or a double team. And the way that the pass rush was working, where instead of, being a fast guy running outside that offensive tackle, they were running straight through those guys. And that, closes the areas for Mahomes to be able to scramble a little bit. So I really enjoyed seeing that just from an overall pass rushing plan for the Eagles. I thought that was a good job. I felt like Andy Reid didn't do the best job in the game, where we can think of maybe an example or two where they're getting the ball a little bit further down the field. Obviously, we have that drop to Hopkins. Of course, some of those touchdowns coming later in the game. I would have really liked to see him just literally, take the snap, throw the ball to the outside, make those cornerbacks tackle over and over, because the way that Fangio was playing, it would have required that. And we saw, I think the Chiefs were down 34-0 by this time, but, Xavier Worthy, you catch a quick throw, Quinyon Mitchell can't tackle you, you're able to get yards. I think, maybe turning that a little bit earlier would have not won the game, but I think it would have made it a bit closer.
I want to follow up, even though you just alluded to my follow-up question. Did you see, because one of the reasons why I picked Kansas City in a close one, like most of America, is Andy and Mahomes typically figure it out. Andy Reid makes the adjustments. Mahomes finds a way to win. did at any point outside of what you just alluded to, because look, a lot of people say, well, they didn't run the football. Well, you're down big, so you've got to get chunk plays, and you have to rely on a generational talent in Patrick Mahomes. But was there anything specifically, Sean, that you saw Kansas City try to do that simply just didn't work?
It felt like every single thing that they were really trying to do didn't work, where you can't throw the ball quick because the defense is really good in coverage. You can't throw the ball intermediate because guys are dropping passes. You can't throw the ball deep because your offensive line is not holding up enough for Mahomes to be able to take that extra step and let that thing fly. So it really felt like none of that was able to work at all. And you mentioned, it would be nice if you could run the ball. There's a clip of Nolan Smith putting Trey Smith are really pushing him far back. I mean, the Eagles were more physical than the Chiefs were up front. They really were able to push them around. I'm not really sure if any plan would have worked on that day. It felt like the Eagles really came in so locked into every single thing that the Chiefs were doing. So I'm not even sure. Like, you see some of those kind of second half adjustments. I guess you call them that for the Chiefs, but I mean, when you're down that big, it's such a big hill to climb, and it just felt like the team with a better roster from top to bottom ended up winning here.
Let's move over to the other side. What did Steve Spagnuolo try to do defensively? Because, look, Kansas City, over the course of their recalibration of just kind of changing their approach, a lot of it probably based off personnel, won a lot of games this year based off of Steve Spagnuolo and that defense. It just did not do much of anything to provide pushback against Philly. What did Spagnuolo try to do, and how did Philly counter that to make it ineffective?
Spagnuolo, I thought, really approached this game in the exact right way. Saquon Barkley was largely shut down. I think when you look at the Eagles, how they've played the entire season, that is what you want to start with. And so for them to have that success is a really good thing. Now, the problem is that Jalen Hurts has had the best game of his career, where the best two games, or maybe 2 of 3 games in his career, have been this game and then the NFC Championship game. So when you look at how the Eagles looked in Week 8, in Week 10, it didn't feel like Hurts was going to be able to do this. So I think the approach was really exactly correct. And just as you got later and later, you are able to get a blitz that ends up getting a sack. But for Hurts to play at that high of a level and really take everything that Spags was trying to do and throw it right back in his face by making those quick throws, by turning some of those escapes into throws to receivers instead of just, you're spinning around in a circle, you end up sacked. And for him to be confident and quick in his process, I thought was super impressive. So I was overall, pretty fine with Spags' approach. I think the bigger takeaway is Hurts really, really stepping up to the moment.
What sort of, because a lot of the conversation certainly around prior to the game was the questions that a lot of people had about Jalen and the questions that a lot of people had about Nick Sirianni. So I already asked you about the Jalen portion of this. What sort of questions did Nick Sirianni answer as a Super Bowl winning head coach now?
I mean, it's so fun to think about just his story. Fun for me to think about it from the outside. I can't imagine it was as fun for him going through it. There was legitimate, totally reasonable calls at the beginning of this year. Are they going to bring Sirianni back? What does he do for this team after Week 4, going into the bye week? Thoughts of, all right, well, this guy's going to get fired and be an offensive assistant somewhere next year where he's never going to be able to get this chance again. I just think that there are things that happen in an NFL locker room, in the NFL building, that a head coach is responsible for, that it is unquantifiable. And you start to hear some of the stories come out, whether it's Sirianni writing his handwritten notes to Isaiah Rodgers who missed the season for a gambling suspension, whether it's, talking to Nakobe Dean after his injury and figuring out different things to get him in the best spot. And I mean, you think about the locker room overall, obviously these are incredibly talented players. There's still personalities, right? Where A.J. Brown had early in the game or earlier in the season, he had said out loud, and he said the correct thing, what's not working? It's the passing game. And so for him to be able to navigate all of that, for him to be able to navigate his relationship with Jalen Hurts, where, sometimes in the media, Hurts is not that he is unfriendly to the media, but I think he's trying to, get through his day. He's trying to get back to the real hard work of it all. So I just think Sirianni does deserve credit. What is it exactly for? I think it is some of those kind of human aspects that we just don't get to see unless you see that the way that he high fives his players on the sidelines, or you see the way that the players do take on that personality a little bit, where Sirianni is gonna almost a shield for other players. Where there was a game last year against the Seahawks where Hurts and A.J. Brown make this kind of odd decision for a specific play that ends up as an interception, and Sirianni just goes up to the media and is like, "Look, that was my call." And now, do I want people to lie to the media? No, not necessarily. But for him to take the fall on that and to kind of make himself look like a little bit of a fool in that situation for his players to be able to, just continue to work on what they need to work on. So seeing that for Sirianni, it's got to feel awesome because no one can ever remove Super Bowl champion head coach from his resume.
So when you win, you're going to lose coaches, and you're going to lose probably players that want to get paid. So Kellen Moore bounces to take the Saints job. What sort of hole does that leave, and who do you think? Do you just give me some candidates to take that gig?
Yeah, I mean, Moore leaving, when Jonathan Gannon had left over their last Super Bowl, the Eagles were kind of unprepared for it just based on the communication with Gannon for what they thought was going to happen. So they've been ready for this eventuality. So Kevin Petula is one guy in-house that they certainly like. He'll get some sort of look at. I think Gerard Johnson, the quarterback coach for the Texans, is a guy who will end up getting an interview if they're doing a full interview process. I assume they have to do an interview process just because he was someone that also interviewed with them previously. There's a few other internal candidates. For the situation overall, it's kind of a dream job. You have the best offensive line in the league. You have a Super Bowl MVP quarterback. You have a very good running back. You have really good receivers. So all the things are there that I hope that they go outside the building. I think that's my initial leaning, just so you can get a little bit more creative. You can move that offense forward where, look, the way that Saquon Barkley ran this year, I think he's going to be fantastic. It's not like he's old or he's not going to be able to do it. There is a chance, though, just based on variance, that you're not able to hit all those home runs. So I would love to see even a guy like T. Martin, the quarterback coach in Baltimore, we've seen Lamar Jackson continue to evolve as a passer, really. And to bring in a guy like that, I think could be a lot of fun.
So, one more thing on the Eagles, then I've got a couple of other big picture NFL questions, and I've asked, the NFL guys who have stopped by this week kind of this similar question, because when you look at the landscape of the league, we often talk about, guys like Lamar and Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes in their late 20s. Jalen's 26, and Saquon's 28. A.J. Brown is 27. Devontae Smith is 26. And, yes, they have some decisions to make on other pieces, but the main portion of this roster is either in or entering their prime. And I'm not a hyperbolic radio host, but what are you willing to say about potentially the type of era of Eagles football that we're in for, should they be able to keep the bulk of this team together for a number of years?
I mean, it really is looking pretty good. And I think that is for a few reasons. And you look at the way that Howard Roseman, that Jeffrey Lurie as the owner, the way that they handle contracts is so smart. They do pay guys a little bit early. And, you have to hit on some of those, right? Because, you can pay a receiver after one good year. If they're not good in that second and third year, it really comes back to bite you. But Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown are already under contract. Jalen Hurts already under contract. So to be able to take care of those guys already and then pay Dickerson, Juergens, you're taking care of really, really core aspects of your team pretty early. Their defensive spending is not that high. So I'm actually very interested to see what this offseason looks like for them, where they're going to probably lose Milton Williams. There's a good chance they lose Zach Bond. Darius Slay's getting a little bit older. I think when I look ahead to next year, I always think, well, what about, a specific team is more likely to look a little bit closer to average, whether that's something that's not good or something that's very good. It's so hard to repeat as a top defense by statistics year after year. I love Vic Fangio, so much, and watching his defense. I really enjoyed going through this roster. You still have Jalen Carter. You have DeJean in year 2. You have Mitchell in year 2. You have so much talent on that team. Sometimes 50-50 balls just end up at touchdowns instead of interceptions or incompletion. So I just worry about just the coin flip and just appreciating how many things have to happen for you to be able to, climb that top of the mountain. Of course, the Commanders and Jaden Daniels, they're really going to be pushing, but this team is in a good financial health situation. Well, you will see things about people saying, oh, the bill's going to come due eventually. And, that can be true. Players are going to get a little bit older. It's not going to happen for a little bit, though. They're going to keep, you push that, you kick the can down the road in terms of having to, have this kind of salary count blow up. You're able to kind of manipulate it in a few different ways that I just wish other teams would do that in the same way. Teams just should. If you learn anything from the Eagles model, it should be that, because you're going to have to pay multiple players a lot of money. It's not a league where you can afford to not do that. So I'm excited to see what the Eagles look like going forward. I really just want to see Jalen Hurts continue to grow. He unfortunately is going to have another new offensive coordinator, as we just mentioned. I want to see him as a really, really, positive passer going into next season.
Certainly it would be a fool's errand to believe that Kansas City is done, with their quarterback in his 20s and a transcendent generational head coach Kelsey, 35, maybe it's it for, maybe that's it for him. What does the offseason look like in Kansas City to ensure that they continue to capitalize on a generational talent under center?
A big thing is going to be what you do with that offensive line, where you had problems at both tackle spots the entire season. Your star right guard is going to be a free agent and is going to get paid a lot of money by someone that may be someone other than you. And as you mentioned, Kelsey, whatever, even if he does come back, he's not a player that is going to be, looking the same early in the season as he is later in the season. So even if he retires, there's talks about what's going to happen with Chris Jones. I do think Chris Jones still has a lot of good football played. And as you mentioned, it's so hard to bet against Patrick Mahomes. What are we doing here? We got not lucky or unlucky, but yeah, it happened in the Super Bowl. I do think they're going to come back. I want to see this team though, get to kind of another iteration of their offense where I really liked watching Xavier Worthy grow over the last few weeks. We saw it, in kind of garbage time in that Super Bowl. This guy can run by every single player on every single team, and Patrick Mahomes can throw it exactly where it needs to be in those situations. So I actually want to see this offense get back to a little bit more of that downfield attack as opposed to we're just going to get 5 yards on inside runs. We're going to throw the ball quick and that. And, it really starts with that offensive line.
So I will take advantage of having a smart football guy on the show to ask you about my Jets, who it looks like they're going to move on from Aaron Rodgers. And thank goodness he's locker room cancer and he's bad at football. So what's next for my guys? Give me a little hope. And not even hope for next year because they're not going to be in it next year, but maybe hope that there's a plan in place that at some point they'll be a competitive NFL football team.
Yeah, even on just at the high level, I enjoy, the hires that they were able to make. I think Aaron Glenn is definitely the right kind of person that you want to bring. I really, really like Ken Ranks from the offensive coordinator they have there, the work that he did in Detroit with Ben Johnson. I think that's the right direction. You have a very talented roster. I don't want us to forget that, where guys like Quinn Williams, Sauce Gardner on defense, of course. I think the offensive line, but there are some positive spots on there. I think that the decision to say, hey, Aaron, we're moving forward, that's also to me a signal of a smart organization, just based on where Rodgers is, based on what it means for the team. Is it you have to have a year of Tyrod Taylor, everything's getting installed? I don't want to tell you to not watch football next season. There is a chance that it's going to be a little bit of a tough ride. I grew up in the area, so I understand how many times you have to hear Jets rebuild. I think when you look at some of the hires that they made up and down, and even the senior advisors and things like that, where you're bringing in people with experience, I think just in the right areas, it gets me excited at that level. Now, it really is going to depend how things happen on the field, where you're obviously in a division where you're going to be looking at Josh Allen a whole heck of a lot.
So let me just kick the tires with a little off-season stuff. Big names that you think could be on the move. I am curious as to your take on Sam Darnold, who once upon a time I actually thought was the answer for my team under center. But teams out there that are maybe a piece or two away, names that could be on the move, and off-season ahead, what do you think it looks like?
Some of the big trades, of course, T. Higgins is going to be a big one if the Bengals aren't able to figure it out. Trey Smith, as I mentioned, he's a really, really good guard from the Kansas City Chiefs. Both of those guys, I think the Patriots would have circled, just because you're trying to fill so many holes on your roster. I think when you look at, DJ Reed from your Jets, there's a chance that he ends up somewhere else. Is he ending up in San Francisco? I think where Darnold ends up will be fascinating. It feels like it could be a situation, I don't know, maybe it's at Las Vegas, just a place where you have the kind of holdover quarterback another year. I think Josh Sweat, is it Arizona? I think a guy like Millen Williams is coming off that Super Bowl. Is he a Charger? I think free agency is exciting, even if there's not, 100 names that you can't wait to look at. But free agency, it's just so important. You want to fill your roster to the point where you go into the draft and can actually just choose the most talented player instead of choosing a player and say, hey, if we don't, hit on our right guard in the draft, our team is totally foiled. So I think it'll be interesting to see, what teams are making what moves. And it's not just the moves that happen, immediately when kind of those transactions are able to start happening. Sometimes a little bit later in free agency as well.
Last thing, Sean, I'll set you loose. Give me the coaching hire you like the most and the coaching hire that left you scratching your head.
Okay, so this is a good one. I think the easy one to point at as a scratching your head one is Dallas with Schottenheimer. At the same time, I don't know, do we expect Dallas to do, I guess, anything that would be like a process that we would love? Probably not. I think that maybe there were a few other names. I think that was more of a process-based one, where I would have liked to see, interviews just kind of in different directions. I think that In terms of the ones that I like, Ben Johnson is an easy one. I really do like Liam Cohen in Jacksonville. I think that one is a fun one. I think it's the right bet to make. I am a little bit biased. You want the young offensive coordinator type person to be running your organization. I just still believe in Trevor Lawrence. I think what Cohen did in Tampa Bay with Baker Mayfield and really morphing his offense from a little bit more, in their run game, they really, really evolved over time. So I think that I'm excited about that. Now, I think one of my favorite things about head coaching hires, there's a chance that Schottenheimer is the best head coach that ever existed. We just don't know until we're able to see it. So I'm excited for Cohen. There's a chance it doesn't work out, but that's probably my favorite one. Where Ben Johnson, I think, is also an easy answer as well.
Sean, where can people go find your work, bud?
You can follow me on Twitter at Science Teams. I just put out a little article just about Vic Fangio, what he's meant to me and my career, and also just about his entire season. So always appreciate the follow. We're going to be doing a lot of free agency stuff with Too Much Sports to do off season.
Thank you, my friend. Appreciate the time. Be well. We'll chat soon, okay?
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Sean Syed joined us last week. He was the one NFL guest we had that was like, this could get loose, man. Philly could smoke them. And they certainly did. So appreciate Sean's time today. We're going to bring in Smitty coming up on the other side for an entire hour. We'll do a little Jazz Lakers. We'll do a little NBA big picture stuff as we're high speed ahead to the All-Star break. And then we'll launch into the 5 o'clock hour of the program. We're going to say goodnight on a Wednesday at 6 o'clock. But it's time now for your chance to win Utah men's basketball tickets. Text Utes. Right now, that's Utes to 33986. Text Utes to 33986 for your chance to win tickets to see the Utah men's basketball program. How do you feel that most every NFL guest we have, and I'm like, hey, which coaching hire do you hate the most? They all say Schottenheimer.
Yeah, I'm kind of with them. And it's not because I don't like Shoddy.
I forgot we call him Shoddy.
It's more because of what was on the table the last calendar 2 years and who the Dallas Cowboys are and should be, and that's kind of where I'm at with it. It's a lukewarm hire. Even though I have, I would say, cautious optimism that it'll be better than the McCarthy era, which, I don't know how high that bar is.
Yeah, it's not a low bar. He wasn't a disaster.
Not with wins, at least.
Yeah, he wasn't a disaster. I think you and I should be allowed to pick new football teams. Do you have any desire?
I think we're allowed.
Do you have any desire? Are you going to ride with the Cowboys? I mean, because that's kind of a family thing for you, right?
Yeah, no, I'll be complaining about the Cowboys offseason until the bitter end.
When I was home for the Super Bowl, it was fun because we were watching the game with like all my little nieces and nephews, and my sister, Lily, who runs Sports-ish, she's done very well. She turned to me and she said, "Do you really cheer for the Jets?" Like, well, yeah. I mean, they've always been my team since I was 10 years old. She's like, you should be allowed to pick a new team. I'm considering the Rams.
Okay. I like it.
I like the Rams. I like the way they play. It might be a bad time because they're about to do a little pivot. I think Stafford's gone. They're trading Cooper Kupp. We got a little local flavor with Puka, right? So I'm considering the Rams.
Some local flavor there. A lot of local flavor in Denver, in Detroit.
I can't do the Broncos, dude. Shout out to our guy Garrett Bowles, friend of the show. But Utah Utes NFL kind of minor league system with Barton and everything. But I can't do the Broncos. There are too many Bronco fans in Salt Lake.
You got another option in New York. Not a great option.
No, man. No, I can't go from the Jets to the Giants. That's like the ultimate Benedict Arnold move.
The Bills are a good organization.
The Bills.
Usually some good teams. They might win one soon.
Dalton, Cole. Like the Bills.
The Jets, hey, Tyrod Taylor might be your starter next year.
Stop it. There's nothing. It doesn't
Let's go.
matter who it is. Okay, the Jets are one of these organizations that will simply never be good. They just won't.
You're not wrong, but Tyrod is your starter week 1 next year, maybe. Step up.
I'd rather have Tyrod Taylor and Aaron Rodgers.
Me too.
Me too. It's a tough scene. All right, we'll catch a quick break. Smitty, live in studio for an entire hour. Coming up next on a chilly Wednesday right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN Radio Network. So I texted Porter today, and I said, look, the Lakers are in town, which means I only want stars on the show. I want superstars. I want celebrities. I want heavy hitters. When the Lakers are here, we have to bring in the heaviest of hitters, the biggest stars that we have in our Rolodex. So, of course, for the next hour, the superstar himself, Richard Smith, is live in studio. Hello, Smitty.
So then Porter texted you back, said, no, we're all out. I got nothing else. So
Oh, come on, man.
we're at the bottom of the barrel. This is all I got. You take it or you leave it or we're off the air or whatever.
This is the top of the barrel, Smitty.
So
top of the heat, my man.
Spence, like you always do, you come through and go, hey, I'll take the last piece of candy in the barrel. I don't care, whoever it is.
Not at all. Not at all. Smitty, how you doing, buddy?
We're doing great.
You watched the Super Bowl?
I did watch the Super Bowl. You know, we have a family thing we've been doing for years. My nephew has a great home where he has one of those big new theater rooms, you
nice.
know, and all that, and big heavy hitter type stuff, and he put together a bingo card that everybody could play, and they were all different,
mm-hmm.
So every square was like missed field goal to the right, or fumble recovered by the offense, or whatever it was. And so everybody was engaged in that all game long, and it came down right to the end. And I had my whole card completed except for one square, and that was the missed field goal, which there wasn't any missed field goal in the game, right? But we were arguing the fact that earlier in the game, if you remember, one of the long sideline passes resulted in a pass interference,
mm-hmm.
And I said, well, the pass interference was because the guy grabbed his face mask. That's a face mask.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a square on my card that says penalty by a face mask. I said, that's a penalty. No, it wasn't. They didn't call a face mask. They said it was pass interference. I said, it was pass interference because he grabbed his face mask. That was the no, that doesn't count. So this is the kind of family arguments you get, you know, when the big candy bar is on the line for the winner. So.
No, I feel like you have a legitimate beef there. Oh, Dave McMiniman's on TV. He's in Salt Lake, friend of the show, consistent guest of the show. I'm sure he's not thrilled to be in Salt Lake when it's 10 degrees outside. It's funny because I talk a lot about I'm fascinated by like ratings and the business of sports and how certain leagues and certain products have captured the market share that they have. It's always been interesting to me. And the NFL just set another record for viewership with the Super Bowl. Fox reported a peak in the second quarter when it was still close-ish of 137.7 million viewers on linear television. Streaming numbers were close to 15 mil. The Spanish broadcast got close to 2. So some quick math. I mean, that's north of 150 million people watching one sporting event, which is pretty stunning, Smitty, when you think about it. I'm just curious as somebody who made a career in pro sports, why you think pro football has been able to capture this market share. And, there are a few different reasons. And, anecdotally, I was home with my family for the Super Bowl, and I was watching with all my nieces and nephews, and we had our little square game going on, and all the, nieces and nephews were allowed to pick a square. And towards the end of the game, because at this point, the kids were upstairs playing. It was a blowout. They didn't give a rip. But my 9-year-old nephew, Teddy, comes up to me and he says, Uncle Spencer, will you come and get me if Kansas City scores a touchdown but misses the extra point? Because if that happens, I'm going to win the gummy bears.
Oh, see that?
It just kind of hits you like this is a 9-year-old essentially gambling on a game.
Of course.
Right? And part of the NFL's market share and the ability to capture it, I think they were able to kind of create a space for gambling on their sport far before it was legal and far before anyone else kind of leaned into it.
Well, and Spence, and my extended family does this as well. They, everybody from the 8-year-old all the way up, they're all involved in the fantasy football every fall, and everybody, they have a draft and they do all this stuff and they check scores and they have a thing online and you can get on and see who got the most points this week or whatever. But that isn't done with any other sport.
Right.
Nobody does it with any other time of the year for anything else, right? And so I don't know if it's because it's the once a week thing. I don't know if it's because it's the time of year, in the fall. And I mean I'm not quite sure exactly what the great hold is. I do know that I've always thought, especially the way technology is now in the last 15, 20 years, and the way they show slow motion and they do all this stuff is that it's gotten more to me of somewhat of the gladiator type thing, the Roman times where everybody's in the arena and they're rooting for the guy to get smashed on the block or whatever it is, or tackled, and thrown up in the air and whatever during the course of a game. So I don't know if that's it or what the how they've ended up marketing it this way. But part of it, I think, I don't know how far down the line it gets, but they have done a good job over the years with the salary cap stuff and the way they put their schedules together. During the course of the season, the guys who played well last year play each other next year, outside of your division and stuff. And they purposely do that so that, in week 16, 17, 18, most of the teams are 8-8 or they're 9-7 or whatever. And so a lot of teams have a chance to get in the last week or two. And I don't know if maybe that's part of the shtick that everybody's feels like their dog is still in the race most of the year. I'm not quite sure how that plays out.
Yeah, and it's interesting to compare because we're an NBA market. We've been an NBA market, for a long, long time now. And I often remind people of this. The highest rated basketball game in the history of the sport was played here in Salt Lake in 1998. It was Michael Jordan's last game. And that was the last time during that era, mid to late 90s, was the last time that pro basketball was even in pro football stratosphere. It wasn't on the level, but there was some data that indicated the ratings had improved in the NBA under, it was Magic, and then it was Larry, and then it was the Lakers Celtics thing. Then Michael took over, and David Stern was a master at his craft to manipulate the media to create this behemoth that was kind of making some inroads as far as the progress with pro football. Again, it was never in that area, but it was making progress. And now the gap could not be wider. The NBA still, by most metrics, is number 3 behind the NFL and college football. Then it's pro basketball. Any thoughts as to why the NBA has not been able to keep up on the domestic viewership? Now, I will add this. The NFL is now talking about trying to capture international audiences. The NBA doesn't really sweat the domestic stuff because their revenue streams internationally are far greater than pro football's. Mm-hmm. As far as the global sport, soccer's one, basketball's two. And so they are able to mitigate maybe some revenue or ratings or eyes or attention domestically because of what they bring in internationally. But as far as the attention span of the American sports fan, why do you think basketball has not been able to keep up?
Well, I don't know. I think the game itself, part of it to me, from my perspective, is having seen rules changes over the years, is that I think maybe the NBA has gone too much, toward trying to make it offensive heavy, mm-hmm. By putting in all these defensive rules, restrictions, and you can't put a hand on somebody, you can't level somebody off, you have an arm bar, but you can't, turn them one way or the other, and so it's all relegated to trying to legislate the game so that we have these 140 to 135 games, mm-hmm. where the good games back in our day, Spence, used to be the Knicks, Pacers, grind them out,
68,
89, 85, and whatever, and but I just think that some of it is it looks to me a little bit like there's too much offense. We don't do enough to help the defensive guys. Everybody wants to score and dunk, and nobody plays defense, per se, because you can see how the scoring is, and some of it's because the way the game is legislated and the way that the rules are, and maybe the fans look at that and go, I don't know, it feels a little bit like wrestling or something, like where it's a little bit artificial because they're not really playing a whole game. They're only playing on one side of the court, if that makes any sense.
Also, I noticed this last night because it's funny you referenced Knicks Pacers. They played each other last night, and I was watching and flipping back and forth. I was watching the Utes and BYU both tipped at 5, and then checking out Knicks Pacers later on. there's not a lot of urgency in pro basketball until the final 5 minutes.
Yeah. Well,
and when you're watching an NFL game, almost every single play feels like life or death. There's just like, and this is anecdotal. I don't really know how to, like, where to grasp this issue to say, okay, it's this or that or whatever. But, a lot of possessions, Halliburton dribbles the ball down the floor, puts it through his legs 3 times, takes a step back 3, and you're kind of like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Just not a lot of urgency, possession by possession.
No, well, in the NFL too, Spence, a lot of the players, not everybody, the big names are secure and they're situated, financially and spots on the team. But a lot of the players on NFL teams, don't have the so-called guaranteed contracts or the big money deals, and a lot of them are week to week. I mean, if you don't perform and you don't play your position, you could be, the ones obviously that are publicized the most are the kickers who miss a crucial kick or 2 extra points in the game, and you see on Monday they cut the guy, and on Wednesday they're having tryouts for a new guy who's going to be the kicker on Sunday. And there's a lot of the other, other players, offensive, defensive linemen, linebackers, who some guys have guaranteed contracts, but a lot of them are, might be, could get cut or they if they get hurt, they go on the injured list and you don't see them again. And I don't know if that has anything to do with that, relative to like the NBA, where virtually every guy on the roster has a guaranteed contract, and especially after, the early January date this year, I think it was January 6th or January 8th or something, which is a guaranteed date. So if you had a non-guaranteed contract and you were on the roster after that date, then your contract's guaranteed for the rest of the year, even if you don't play a minute.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I've always thought there's some problem with that in the NBA, where there's too much, quote, free money, and nobody really has to go out and earn it per se once they get it. And and there's something to the sense of urgency that if I don't perform tonight, and I don't play hard, and I don't dive on the floor, and I don't step in and try and take a charge or whatever it is, that I may not be on the team on Friday. That's not a feeling, because even if they let you go, they don't like you for whatever reason, you're not playing well, whatever. Well, I made it past the guaranteed date, so I'm getting my money.
Making your money,
that kind of thing.
Yep.
So I don't know if there's something to that all those are linked together, and people are going, yeah, well, these guys are getting paid a lot of money, and they don't really look like they're playing hard. I don't know why I should invest my time in that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's some good points. All right. I was excited to have you in because I wanted to talk to you about this dynamic. And this is going to be a very loose parallel because I don't think there's anything where we can be entirely analogous. But follow me for a second. So Lakers are in town tonight. Obviously, it has been a crazy news cycle surrounding the decisions made by roster constructors in pro basketball to do some things that feel a little bit unprecedented to me and feel a little bit noteworthy, if I could use a jazz phrase. Patrick Dumont is the part of the new ownership group in Dallas, and it's been a rough week for our guy. He walked into a Mavericks home game to a tremendously loud chorus of boos, and he turned to a security guard and he said, "Are they booing me?" And he said, "Yes, they are." Nico Harrison has been kind of revealed as like the rogue decision maker here that is behind the Luka Doncic decision because he simply didn't believe, as you outlined last week, in his off-court habits. And do you want to invest $355 million in a player who you don't think takes care of himself? We've been all over all the things. This is a decision that could cost Nico his job, and it feels like it is already costing Dallas a tremendous amount of goodwill in that community. Can you recall whether it was Scotty or whether it was Kevin or Dennis, a personnel decision that you guys had to make as a front office where you went, okay, here we go. We just made a call on Darren or whatever, and now it's on. Now it's going to be on us as to whether or not this works out. Is there anything that even comes to mind as far as the same type of heat they're kind of facing in Dallas?
Well, first of all, the profile of the players involved in this Dallas Laker trade was at the top of the heap. So that's the first thing. Secondly, these aren't unusual, and we've talked about that before, Spence, too, and across all sporting lines, whether it's a Babe Ruth or whether it's a Wayne Gretzky or whether it's a Wilt Chamberlain, whoever it is, these guys have all been traded. These things have happened before. The thing that I don't, if I was the guy overseeing and I was just, waving a magic wand, whatever that means, in this scenario, I would advise Nico Harrison and Patrick Dumont to instead of running away from what's going on. In other words, Nico doesn't show up in his usual seat for a game.
Yep.
He doesn't show up for the first game after the trade. Wasn't there at all. That to me, if I'm a fan, I look at that and go, okay, that even makes me a little more, upset about this, or there's something else, that I'm like, I would rather see them turn around and do just the opposite, just hit it head on, and I was just saying to James Peterson before he came on the air, hey, if I was them, I'd say, hey, you know what we should do? We should have a town hall meeting tomorrow at noon. Anybody who's upset at this, come on down. Let's go. And you guys pay the bills. You guys are investing in this like us. We'll answer the questions. Now, if I get a question and I don't feel like revealing corporate secrets or things that I think should stay in house, then I'll say so. But I'm going to give you the opportunity to vent to me and for us to talk it through and to give you as much as I can the rationale of why we don't just do this. I mean, if I'm playing Nico Harrison for a minute, I don't just wake up in the middle of the night and say, hey, I think it's a good idea if we get rid of one of the best players in the league. And I'm not going to tell anybody why. We're just going to do it. Like that doesn't really wash with a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So, you have to explain to people, you don't explain all of your business, obviously, but you tell people as much as you can about this process. And you have to ask people to think for a minute, to step back and say, do you think we would trade a top 5 player who's not even in his prime yet age-wise, who's performing the way he has performed so far for us, for just to do it and just to get a different look on our team? I mean, I hope you think that we have more than that in our substance in making these decisions to be able to exercise something that we know is going to be difficult, to deal with. Mm-hmm. We didn't think this was just going to go in a 24-hour news cycle and then everybody's on to the next thing. And so, give us some credit, or at least have some substance to thinking that there's a rationale, there's some reasoning behind why we would make such a move, in the benefit of our organization, of you, our fans. That's what our responsibility is. And I would just hit it head on, in that regard, because that's usually, if you look in the past in any scenario of this nature, Spence, where there's an uproar about any decision, is it a sports decision? Is it a governmental decision? Is it something, that affects our culture, our life? People who are in those positions, that when they've just faced the music head on and took it on and said, hey, let's go. What do you got? Let's talk it out and do that. Most of the time people go, yeah, but what if this thing? And you go, well, because of A, B, and C, whatever. And then you find out people realize, okay, I don't know, but they start backing down because they understand that you're in a difficult position and you wouldn't make a decision like this unless you actually felt somewhere that this made sense for the overall business that we're running. Whether you understand what those things are or you don't, I can communicate some of them to you. Some of them I might not be able to, but at least rationally look at it, for what it is, instead of trying to find, some underbelly or some there's got to be some secret thing that's going on that nobody's telling us, whatever. And, it's just, I think people, you have to give people credit, for trying to help you to overall understand what this overall situation is, if that that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. I just don't personally see the rationale. Now, Bob Myers made a really compelling point because about an hour after the trade was announced, he was on the dais for the NBA on ESPN coverage, and he said, look, I'm not saying that Anthony Davis is Luka, but what I am saying is peak Anthony Davis and peak Luka Doncic, if you can get like a 7-game healthy peak Anthony Davis, he is still one of the elite talents in all of the league.
Well, he affects the game.
Yes,
right.
yes. And so now the problem is he's hurt now, and he might be shelved for 4 or 5 weeks. And so as we react to what's in the moment, if you're Nico Harrison, the worst case scenario happened where he's hurt. And so even, if he's able to come back and at some point maybe make a difference in the postseason, where we are in the news cycle right now is these guys are getting killed. The only thing I could think of is when Kevin decided to trade Darren, as far as trying to be analogous here in the market. Now, the circumstances were much different, and that's what I think confuses a lot of people because Darren and Jerry had their thing. And so Kevin had Jerry's back and said, we don't want this malcontent. We're going to hit the reset button. There are no indications. Like, it's been interesting seeing the look on Jason Kidd's face whenever he's been front-facing. He didn't do media the other night. I would be very curious to hear what Jason Kidd had to say in a very honest moment about, as a coach, losing a guy like that. But this is different because it doesn't appear that Luka had issues with the coach or his teammates. From what we know, this was a executive making a decision almost on his own. But Kevin never struck me as a monolith, right? You guys were very a front office that would communicate together and come up with ideas. Did you guys feel the heat when you decided to do the Darren thing?
No, it was a different set of circumstances because I think the general Jazz fan back at that time, if you remember, had the blow up between Darren Williams and Jerry Sloan, and the prompted Jerry to step down and resign, and then shortly after that. Kevin made the move to trade Darren because he thought that was he also thought it was again similar to the De'Aaron Fox situation in Sacramento a few weeks ago, where Fox came out and said, it didn't say it directly, but there were all indications internally that he's not gonna come back here when he's a free agent, right? Whether it's De'Aaron Fox. That was the so-called scuttlebutt with Donovan Mitchell. I'm not sure if that was totally accurate or a truism, but that's what the general perception was. With Darren Williams, it was the same similar type thing. We don't know if Darren Williams is going to come back when he's a free agent in a year and a half, and so let's we put that together with the discord or whatever was going on, with Coach Sloan and that kind of stuff, and you go, okay, maybe it makes sense to do something now, while your value is high in terms of that player. But again, Spence, Kevin O'Connor, did I wouldn't say exactly the same because obviously I wasn't in the room, with Nico Harrison and all that stuff, but Kevin, in a similar fashion, did handled it in kind of the same framework that Nico Harrison did with Darren Williams. He didn't tell any of us what was going on in our so-called inner circle, whatever that was. I didn't know what was happening. Kevin did it with his good friend Billy King, who was the general manager of the Jersey Nets at the time. They had worked together in Philadelphia 10 years earlier, become very good friends, very good colleagues. They felt they could trust each other in terms of doing some kind of a deal that didn't get out in the media, a la the Jimmy Butler Miami Heat type thing. And they put a package together and discussed it. And then Kevin went to the Miller family and said, hey, I think for reasons A, B, and C, this is a good time to make a move like this, even though it's our best player and it's going to hurt us in the short term. But I think it'll help us somewhere down the line in the long term. Okay, the Millers bought into that. Okay, and I'm sitting in my office on the day that it was leaked, and I see a scroll on the TV in my office that says, breaking news, Darren Williams traded to, I'm going, what is that? Whatever. And then Kevin literally like walked through my office. I said, hey, what is this thing on the TV? And he looks and he goes, oh, is that out already? And I looked at him. I said, is that a real thing? He goes, yeah. In typical Kevin fashion, he shrugged and then kept walking. So now I got to go chase him down the hallway into his office. What's going on? Whatever. And, but he did a similar thing where he played it close to the vest because he didn't want to be out in the public, didn't want to have to deal with media and all that kind of stuff in a similar fashion to what happened with Dallas and Lakers last week. And sometimes front office people in those decision-making roles will handle things in a particular way because they feel that's the best way to handle it with the least amount of noise going on around it, and it doesn't really affect, the decision-making process that they're going through.
All right, coming up next, 30 games left for the Utah Jazz. We'll do a little Jazz Lakers, then we'll look at some big picture storylines. But let's bring in Ryan from the Dish Professionals. New year, new you, new budget. Save money on your internet, on your wireless, on your cable television as well. Just dial 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
This is actually a really fun time for us because the promotions right now are so cool. We've got so many neat different options, and this truly drives home. Listen, don't you dare call an 800 number because you're going to probably miss out on some stuff that as the elite premier retailer and retailer of the year, guys, we can offer that you can't get when you just call Dish directly. Now, you always get the very best price. So as far as the monthly price is the same, but what about the additional extras when you get set up? We've got the standard offer, which is the 2-year promotion. The price is guaranteed. You're familiar with that. But, guys, this Netflix offer is so cool. You get Netflix free for the next 2 years. This is worth $431 by itself. If you didn't know, Netflix did a pretty significant rate increase, more than 20%. Similar to what you saw with Fubo and YouTube TV and fiber internet in a lot of locations. And, heck, we see the rate increases with cable all the time. It seems like it's every couple months. Listen, call us up, take advantage of the deals, get the free stuff that's available, the free Netflix. The price is guaranteed. It's going to be cheaper than what you're currently paying, or in the case right now, it's exactly the same price as YouTube TV. But the price isn't going to change for 2 years, and I can promise you that's not going to happen with YouTube TV. You're just going to see price increases over and over. Call us up, take advantage of that, and then we got this extra little tool, which I love, where Dish sends out 60, 70,000 pre-qual gift card offers are very specific for individual people. They come in the mail, and a lot of people just throw away the junk mail. But I got a tool now. I can look that up, and we are at literally 65% of the customers that call in. We actually can find them that gift card that they missed and attach that to the offer. And this is a big gift card. This is where we see people say $3,000-$4,000. You got to just call us. Free stuff, free money. You just got to call 424-DISH, 801-424-3474.
All right, there he is, Ryan from the Dish Professionals. More with Smitty coming up next right here on ESPN 700. LeBron James, Luka Doncic rolling to town tonight. The LA Lakers taking on the Utah Jazz. We got Richard Smith live in studio for one more big segment. All right, Smitty, 30 games left for the Jazz. I think a lot of people that don't maybe follow the league closely feel like the All-Star break is the halfway point. It's very much not. Past the halfway point about 2.5, 3 weeks ago. So 30 games left for the Jazz, and the Lakers come into town tonight. And, you know, it's interesting. A lot of the national guests that we have on to talk pro basketball, some of them will text me before the interview like, dude, I got nothing on the Jazz. So just like, don't ask me about it. And with this entire boom of the media attention surrounding Luka and LeBron, I've listened to a lot of podcasts, watched a lot of coverage, and they all say the same thing, like, well, we can't learn anything about them yet because they're only playing the Jazz, not a serious team about winning this year. With 30 games left, what would you say to Jazz fans about some takeaways you've had that are positive, that they can just kind of latch onto, if there's anything there to indicate that this thing is moving in the right direction?
Well, that's a difficult question, Spence, because there hasn't been a lot. I mean, to be honest, they're in the third year of this tear down, rebuild, reboot, however you label it. Their overall team defense hasn't gotten any better. Hasn't gotten appreciably better, whether that's by schematics, whether that's coaching, whether that's the players who aren't executing what the coaches want, whatever it is, it hasn't gotten any better. They're still a bottom five defensive team. Lauri Markkanen, had a very good first year with the Jazz. Obviously, played to an all-star level. He's gone down a little bit. Some of that I think is just because he doesn't have a good team around him, and so there's other teams are leaning on him a little bit. But how about this little tidbit, which is interesting more than anything that's really helpful to the cause. But John Collins, through 2/3 of the season, after they play these two games, they'll really be 2/3 of the way through the season. John Collins is playing at close to a 180 clip. He's shooting over 50 from the floor. He's shooting 44 from three and 87 from the line. So he's almost close to, touching up on that 50, 40, 90 line that we talked about Lauri Markkanen last year. Touching John Collins is playing efficient. Now, he hasn't played a lot of games. He's been out a bunch of games. He's been out like 14, 15 games. He's only started half the games that the Jazz have played. But the other guy who's been playing very efficiently and is out currently with an ankle injury is Colin Sexton, who's played very well. And again, he's played much more efficiently than Lauri Markkanen is. If you look at their numbers, Sexton to Markkanen, field goal percentage 48 to 42, 3-point percentage 41 to 35. Free throw percentage 89 to 86. I mean, Colin Sexton has played very efficiently, very well. So he's played better this year. So he's a guy that I'm excited to see if they hold on to him in the offseason, because I think he can really continue to play well and play efficiently. He's really grown into his game and his body and the way he plays aggressively on the court. Walker Kessler has shown to me that he's a rim protector. He's a natural rebounder. He's a guy who can get you a double-digit rebounds. He's going to average a double-double. I think he's never going to be a great scorer, but he's going to be able to get mop-up points and easy rim runs and stuff like that. And I think he'll always be like a 12-and-12 type guy. And then if he can average a couple block shots, I think he's someone who's a keeper for them, with Markkanen, with maybe Sexton, how they see that. John Collins, again, I've never been a big John Collins fan, but he's played better this year. He's got a year left on his contract, which is a big number, 26 for what he does. But John Collins is also the same age as Lauri Markkanen. Mm-hmm. So he's not an old guy. He came in young. So these are guys that you think I don't know if they'll all be with them, next year. But I think they're guys who can be guys that are somewhat of a foundation. Now, you still have to have a couple of these young guys show up. The one guy who's played better Still don't know if I really like his game that much, but he has improved somewhat in these first 50 games. Is Isaiah Collier? He's a natural passer. Sometimes he gets too deep into the defense, into the paint, and predetermines where he's going to throw the pass, and he's turnover prone that way. But he's really looks like he's got a good feel early in the offense to where the ball's supposed to be. And the other thing I like about him is that he'll get it and he'll push it aggressively from free throw line to free throw line. So instead of walking it up like Keontae George does and saunter into an offense, Collier will really push it, and he'll make a quick speed pass to somebody up ahead to try and get something early. And that's what I just like, that mindset that, trying to push it to be aggressive that way. He's a young guy. He's 2 years removed from high school, so he's got a ways to go. But I like some of his natural tendencies when he has the ball in his hand to get it to teammates. Now, his issue obviously is he can't shoot, and so does that get appreciably better, or at least better enough that he can stay in the lineup and stay on the floor late in games and make some things happen. But I like his game a little bit. It's growing on me a little bit. But a lot of the other guys, the jury's still out. I'm not sure how many of them, if any of them, will be here long term.
So let's dig into Collier a little bit more, because I agree with you. There are a lot of things to like. 7 games with 10+ assists. No Jazz rookie's ever done that. Now, I'm sure John could have pulled that off if he played a little bit more as a rookie. He was behind Ricky Green. But you referenced the splits, the shooting splits. He's 21% from three. So it's not like, he can't really shoot it. No, he can't shoot it at all. Mm-hmm. But there are some things about him that are innate that he has that I wasn't sure that would translate to pro basketball, because we didn't see a ton of him in college. Only saw 1 year. And to your point, it's important to reiterate, 2 years out of high school he's a puppy. I mean, he's so young. But there are some things that he has that you can't necessarily teach. And then there are some things that he has to work on, namely shooting. If he puts in the work, okay, tap into your knowledge, 40+ years, with the Jazz. Do you have a success story that we can point to as a young player that, I can remember Carl as a rookie shooting free throws, and you're like, dude, just hit the rim so maybe we can get the rebound. Yeah. He turned into a 75% free throw shooter. Yeah. You can learn to shoot it, right? Like, do you think Isaiah can learn to be a 35% three-point shooter?
Well, yeah, time will tell. I don't know what kind of a worker he is. I don't know if he's a guy who's determined to do that. Again, we'll see that bear itself out as we go forward. The one thing about him, he's got elite speed. When he gets the ball out of bounds, he can really push it, and he can really push it quickly. And he also has a great first step when he gets the ball in a half-court offense and he sees that he has a slight advantage on his guy. He can put it on the floor, and he can get 2 steps really quickly right to the dotted line. And then he's got that powerful body. He's got like a Marcus Smart type body. And so he can get it. He can get it with speed. He sees the floor. He's got to smooth out those rough edges. Will he ever be a serviceable shooter? Okay, we'll see that. That was also a concern with Marcus Smart when he came into the league, and obviously he made himself into a bona fide player in this league, and obviously was the defensive player of the year a couple of years ago. This kid has the chance to be something like that with his innate speed, feel for the game. Now can he smooth out the other parts of his game to make himself more valuable and someone who gets more extended time as he goes along. But he's a guy who I would if I was a fan, I'd be keeping an eye on to see how he improves, because he has the body and he has some of the innate athleticism that you need in this league as a lead guard to have some success. Can he grow into that 3 years from now when he's 23 years old? Is he appreciably better, and is he one of the guys you're counting on? That's one of the things that you want to take into account.
Yeah, it's tough, man. It really is tough to make this team interesting when they're not trying to win. And even the people that cover them day to day are just kind of doing everything they possibly can to try to come up with topics that are interesting. I do think there's some things to like about Isaiah. I do think Walker has shown a very real step forward. It was tough to see Taylor Hendricks go down. It would have been nice to analyze his growth. The rookie year of Cody Williams. Okay, now Cody's had some injury issues. I'm pulling up his numbers right now. So Cody right now has played in 27 games. He started 12. When you pick a guy in the top 10, I just think you hope it looks a little bit better than it has. I know he's had some moments in the G League, but, as we're trying to analyze who these young players are, whether or not they can be part of winning basketball, we've got to talk about these rookies. I mean, do you think behind closed doors they're a little bit concerned, even though he is still just a kid?
Yeah, I don't know. That's hard to say just because of without being there every day and being in practice, being in film sessions, talking to those guys one-on-one to get a real feel for who they are, what their mindset is, what their desires are to be a top-level professional. It's hard to say. For me, this year for Cody Williams has been a washout. He's been a bust for me as far as showing any kind of potential. He's long, he's thin, okay, whatever. So what does that mean? My old colleague and obviously one of you guys on the radio station here weekly, Coach Chiesa, would always come back with if you brought up a guy that he didn't like or question about what he could do to help you, he'd always come back with just this 3-word question, which was always very salient, as succinct as it could be. You'd bring up a guy, and you'd say, Cody Williams, Cody Williams. He'd go, to do what? To do what? Yep. To do what? Yeah. And that's what I would say about him. Somebody brings him up, I go, to do what? What does he do? He doesn't guard anybody. He doesn't use that length, athleticism. He hasn't shown any toughness. He doesn't have any kind of offensive game that he could go to, whether it's a dribble drive game and use his athleticism to get up and over guys and do that, or around guys with quickness, or can't shoot it over the top of guys. I don't know what he does. So this has been an interesting year for him. I think I would label it as a disappointment myself. I don't know what they see in him going forward. If it's just he has to get his mindset, he has to get some toughness, he has to get some strength, his body has to get his skill level up. Although, for him, on that, if you're grading him out on a report card, all those things are things that he has to get better at, or he's not going to, graduate to the next class. That's just the way it is. And so, they have quite a few of those guys for me, but he's one that sticks out that you go, yeah, he just, to me, it looks like he's, not sure what he's doing out there, and doesn't play with a lot of confidence and doesn't play with any sweat. Like Collier, he makes a mistake. Okay, he throws it up in the fourth row, whatever. But he plays with a certain amount of confidence and toughness, at least offensively, aggressiveness, I should say. But Cody Williams for me is a big question mark.
All right, I just look. There's just nothing to talk about with the rest of the roster. They're not serious about winning. We all know what time it is. We all know what they're trying to do. It makes it really challenging day to day to try to even make it somewhat fascinating. Jazz fans continue to show up. Jazz fans rule, and I think the building will be packed tonight. But when it comes to what J.J. Redick has now at his disposal, I was listening to J.J.'s media after the Jazz game, and then he did some media, I want to say it was yesterday, maybe after practice. Made a point that with their roster now, the third best defender on the opposing team has to guard Austin Reeves. Now, Austin is not Luka or LeBron, but he's a good player. You can run stuff through Austin Reeves. He's a capable ball handler. He passes it pretty well, and when he gets going, he can really score. But obviously the headline is LeBron and it's Luka. How do you think this is going to work? And what do you think JJ is going to try to implement to make sure? Because they now have the opportunity to play 48 minutes of pro basketball with either Luka Doncic or LeBron James. I still think Oklahoma City is head and shoulders above everybody. I will not bury the Denver Nuggets, even though a lot of people have. Jamal Murray's been better as of late, but they have the best player on the planet, Nikola Jokic. But when it comes to what JJ Redick has at his disposal, Jazz fans going to the game, what do you think this Laker attack is going to look like right away? And what's best case as far as what it looks like when it's fully baked?
Well, I think that, it's they have 2.5 guys. If you're talking about being a serious contender, whether it's Doncic, James, and Austin Reeves, who I like some. Austin Reeves is a beneficiary of having played with 2 great players so far in his career in Davis and James. Now he's playing with James and Doncic. And so he gets to do some things, and maybe if he's with the Jazz team, I don't think he's as effective because he'd be asked to do too many things that he's not used to doing at a high volume level. But I like the way he plays. I liked him at Oklahoma. He played well. In college, was an all-around kind of guy. But he's a guy who plays off of the strengths of his teammates, and he's been playing with a couple of great teammates. So far in L.A., and that's been switched out. But we'll see what how it is going forward. But they still have a big problem with their roster. Mark Williams, the trade didn't go through, and now the other kid just got hurt. The other big guy that they have, the name escapes me at the moment, with the Lakers, and so now they're really down. They're short a big guy. Whether it's Jared Vanderbilt is going to try and plug in there, it's going to be tough. Their roster is not very good beyond those guys, and so they have to rely when they get to the playoffs. They have to hope that Doncic and James are healthy, that Reeves is healthy, which he's been for the most part. But Doncic and James are going to be playing 42, 43, 44 minutes in playoff games. And we've seen both guys be able to lift their teams up with the way that they play. And so I wouldn't put anything past a team that has a healthy LeBron James on it because he's always proven that he's that good, when the real lights come on. So can they get past OKC? Can they get past Memphis, which is a very good team when they're healthy? Can they get past a healthy Denver team? These are tough teams that are going to give them a lot of problems. Is Golden State going to be better toward the end of the season when Jimmy Butler gets in a flow? And if those guys are healthy, with Green and Curry, can they make some kind of noise in the playoffs? It's as we always say, Spence, the old worn out adage, right? The player's best ability is his availability, and so that's what it comes down to when you get to the playoffs: is who's on the floor, who's healthy, and can they carry a team over a 7-game stretch, in that kind of an atmosphere.
You referenced the Mark Williams trade being rescinded, which meant the Lakers had to tell Dalton Connect they actually liked them a lot all along.
Yeah.
And same thing on the other side. That has to be a unique challenge. When a trade is done, you were telling a story off air about the Ronnie Cycli deal back in the day.
Yep.
That really, would have given you guys a very talented center. My understanding of the story is Ronnie did not want to live in Salt Lake City. What's it like when the trade is actually consummated and then for whatever reason it falls apart? Then you have to remind the guy you traded, wait, no, we actually do like you.
Well, back then, Spence, to refresh some memories of our fans, maybe some haven't even heard this story, but in 98, February of 98, near the trade deadline, the Jazz decided to try and get an offensive threat in the center position to go along with Karl Malone, John Stockton, Jeff Hornacek, making another push toward a second NBA Finals. So they got a deal done with Orlando where they were willing to trade Chris Morris, Greg Foster, and a first-round pick to the Orlando Magic for Ronnie Cycli. And Ronnie Cycli was an offensive center, was a good player, and would have fit in well with what the Jazz were doing at that time. And the Jazz and Orlando actually made the trade. Chris Morris and Greg Foster went to Orlando. They did their physical. They actually attended an Orlando practice.
Wild.
And then they were pulled off the court after practice. And Ronnie Cycli was balking about coming, something about, whether he wanted to play here or he wanted his contract extended if he was coming, something. And so finally the trade was just called off, and the parties involved said, you know what, there's too much heavy lifting going on here. We're just going back to what we had. And so Greg Foster and Chris Morris come back to the Jazz. They have a meeting with Jerry Sloan. You guys got a problem. This is the NBA. This is the business. Both guys were like, no, we get it, whatever. And the Jazz ended up that year going on and making another run to their second NBA Finals in '98 with both those guys playing minutes in rotation and Greg Foster doing his famous throat slash and near the end of Game 4 in L.A. to help the Jazz get over the hump and get to the NBA Finals again. And that's just part of the business. You hope you got guys who understand that. A young guy like Dalton Connect, he's a rookie. Okay, he's a little bit of an older rookie, but guys, Jerry Sloan will always say, are your feelings hurt? Okay, well, you got about 10 minutes to get over that, and then we got work to do, and that's just the business, and it's an unfortunate part. And it's a difficult part because sometimes, people's families are involved and those kinds of things. And you have to deal with that. And that's all part. That's why the trade deadline being in the middle of the season like that is really uneasy for everybody, because nobody wants to have to go through that and be in situations like that.
What's one thing, before I set you loose, that you find interesting about tonight? Because it's like we've talked about, it's tough to cover a team that's not trying to win, and you're reaching for storylines, and maybe Isaiah Collier's this or that. Before I set you loose, one interesting tidbit for tonight's game.
Well, I just got one that's way out in left field, Spence.
What do you got?
Doesn't make any difference about anything.
Yeah.
But I was talking to Coach Lane about this the other day. First time I can ever remember, and I'm pretty sure this would be right, that the Jazz are playing the teams from L.A. 4 games in a row. Think about it.
Yeah.
They played the Clippers in L.A., played the Lakers in L.A., played the Lakers in Salt Lake, play the Clippers tomorrow night. They never used to, whenever you'd go to L.A., you never used to play both teams on the same trip. They always split it up for whatever reason. So you'd always go there, play the Lakers, go back, go to Phoenix, go to Sacramento, go somewhere else. 3 weeks later, go back to L.A. to play the Clippers, whatever. Now they've got this thing where, an unusual quirk in the schedule where they're playing the L.A. teams 4 times in a row, which is unusual. That's about the best thing I can come up with for any interesting storyline about the game tonight, Spence, because otherwise, really, let's be honest, it's just game 51 out of 82 in early February that nobody really cares much about, other than maybe Luka Doncic and LeBron James both play, maybe. Are they both going to play?
They're both playing, according to what we've been told. More Laker fans or Jazz fans in the building tonight?
Well, that's always been a question forever. Anytime the Lakers come, there's always a large contingency of Laker fans in the Delta Center building, and which is always we always would have a big bone to pick with a lot of the season ticket holders who would sell their tickets to some people they knew were Laker fans and try and make a bunch of money off them and stuff. And the Laker fans always show up. They always show up in Salt Lake. Yeah.
All right, Smitty. Well, great to see you as always. We'll continue to make NBA basketball interesting, even though the Jazz are tough to cover.
Hey, that's what we're here for.
Indeed. Enjoy the game. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, man.
All right. The great Richard Smith, 40 years with the Jazz front office. Before we get to the 5 o'clock hour of the program, we welcome in Ryan from the Dish Pros. New year, new you. Save money. Save a grip of money on your wireless, on your internet, on your cable television as well. All you have to do is dial 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
We love saving people money, and guys, this is such a good time to call. These new offers for customers have never, ever been this good. I remember when we first started, you would get maybe movie channels free for a couple months and free install. And guys, the offer right now is massive. And I know you're like, oh, well, I'm not really interested in traditional TV. Well, guys, listen, YouTube TV costs the same amount as Dish now. Now, this is going to change. YouTube TV is going to be way more expensive than Dish in the future, mark my words, along with Fubo. Fubo is the same price. It's all going to get more expensive. So if you're looking for like a back way around this, it's not going to work. And I'll tell you, the best thing is right now, if you get set up, it's the same price, but the price is guaranteed. Plus, I'll throw in Netflix free for the next 2 years. That's worth $431. Guys, now it's cheaper. So it's cheaper. You get the fastest DVR, the biggest DVR, auto hops commercials, auto records your locals, auto records your games for you. You get full content access on the Dish Anywhere app, and every single receiver comes with a remote locator. Plus, you have all the streaming apps available built in the system, including Netflix, which you'll get for free for the next 2 years. Listen, call up, get set up, get the best TV solution out there, truly a VIP TV solution with a price guarantee. We'll throw in dinner at JCW's, and we'll throw in some movie channels too. But really, the Netflix offer is the icing on the cake. That's an awesome offer. And, yeah, Netflix went up from, like, what, 14 something to $17.99. So, guys, it's a lot more expensive, and it's just going to get more expensive. So make it cheaper. Call us today, 424-DISH, 801-424-3474.
All right, 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. The 5 o'clock hour of the program comes your way next right here on ESPN 700. All right, what's going on? Drive at 5 time on a chilly, man. The cold will hit you in the teeth today, Wednesday afternoon. Commute home on a Wednesday starts right about now, and as it is every day, it's good to have you along for the ride. The 5 o'clock hour of the program today is brought to you by my good friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. Just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. All-Star Weekend is almost here, and the Prize Picks is the best place to win cash while watching your favorite players during the game on Sunday, and then the Saturday night events as well, like the three-point contest or the dunk contest. If you've not grabbed the free money that Prize Picks is offering you as a result of being a client on our show, encourage you to download the Prize Picks app today and use that promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly. When you play $5, that's promo code ESPN700 on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play only $5. Win or lose, you'll get $50 for just playing. That's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game all season long. Some interesting storylines going on locally. We've had a really busy show today. Started things off with Mike Yam. We got Neil Smith for a little Utah Hockey Club, Sean Syad for more pro football, then Smitty live in studio. For an entire hour, I asked Smitty to make the Lakers-Jazz game interesting tonight. He offered us a tidbit that for the first time in Jazz history, they have 4 straight games against L.A. teams, so I guess there's that. But LeBron James, Luka Doncic in town to take on the Utah Jazz. Luka was listed as questionable yesterday, but he is probable, according to reports now, as the Jazz welcome in the team right now that everybody is talking about in pro basketball in the L.A. Lakers. So Jazz Lakers tonight. We do have Utah women's basketball on our station. Utah welcomes in Colorado. The Utes are 18-5. They're 9-3 in conference. They are tied for 3rd place with Oklahoma State. TCU and Baylor are 11-2. K-State 10-2. Oklahoma State, Utah at 9-3. Utes are 18-5 overall. Utah is an 11.5-point favorite tonight, welcoming in the Colorado Buffaloes. The Utah men had a tough loss last night. After a pretty good start, the game was tied at 72 apiece. And then Cincinnati went on an 11-0 run down the stretch. They took an 85-75 win over the Utes. Utah's lost 3 of their last 4 games. They welcome in Kansas and K-State, a couple of Kansas teams here in Salt Lake City, a couple of Big 12 games for the Utes as they are at this point trying to tread water and hopefully fight for their postseason life of some sort. BYU got a big win last night in Morgantown over a tough West Virginia team. Really good close. BYU had lost 2 straight games. They lost at home to Arizona. Then they got trounced at Cincinnati. BYU returns home, ironically enough, for 2 games against the 2 teams from Kansas as well. It'll be K-State down in Provo. That's coming up on Saturday. And then it's Kansas down in Provo as well. 73-69. BYU got that win last night. Yegor Demin with some big buckets down the stretch. And BYU started to figure out a little bit. You know, that's a really talented team. A lot of pro prospects. Demin, according to a lot of people, potentially a lottery prospect. And again, those 2 losses were superseded by 4 straight wins. And BYU finds themselves now tied with Baylor and K-State in Big 12 play. Houston continues to lead the way, and then it's Arizona. Surprising Texas Tech team. Iowa State, after stumbling, they've been better as of late. Then it is Kansas at 8-5. Then BYU, Baylor, and K-State are all at 7-6. So a little college basketball. Ironically enough, man, we are high speed ahead to March. Utah women after tonight only have 5 games after tonight. 6 games left on the season in the regular season for the Lady Utes after they take on Colorado tonight. So we are high speed ahead to the close of college basketball. And then we move into March. Now the big story today locally is after 20 years as the BYU athletic director, Tom Holmoe has announced his retirement. He did media today. They had a very reverent press conference where Tom addressed the group, and then the president of BYU also spoke about the national search that is underway right now to replace Tom Holmoe after 20 years. So for me, the Big 12, finding their way into a P4 conference is the kind of the feather in the cap of Tom Holmoe, and whoever takes over is going to have really, really a tough ask. You never want to take over for a legend. So I know, obviously, a lot of Utah fans up this way. We're the home of the Utes, but Tom is a good man. He did a great job, and he really traversed a lot of complicated spaces, namely independence, what they had to go through for COVID. I always kind of analyze athletic directors when it comes to their hires. And for college athletics right now, football and basketball hires, Tom hired Bronco Mendenhall, Kalani Sitake hired Dave Rose, Mark Pope, and now Kevin Young. So Tom Homo steps aside and leaves a massive hole. Got a little Utah women's basketball coming your way. The Lady Utes welcome in Colorado into the Huntsman Center for a 7 o'clock tip. Only 6 games left in the regular season for the Lady Utes. They are tied now for 4th in the Big 12. Tied for 3rd. Should not gyp them like that with Oklahoma State. Utah men, after a tough loss last night at Cincinnati, going to return home to take on Kansas and K-State. Utah men have 7 games left. Final game of the season at BYU. BYU was able to pick up a win last night in Morgantown. Really tough place to play against a good West Virginia team. That is a quad 1 win for BYU. Utah State, man, my goodness. I know we've talked about this. It is remarkable, just the type of basketball. And the culture thing sometimes really grades on me. But, I always feel like people talk about culture after the fact, after they actually start winning. They are 22-3. They are 2nd in the Mountain West Conference, only to New Mexico, who they lost to. They're going to see New Mexico coming up on, is that Sunday? 2 o'clock Mountain Time at New Mexico. So they'll see New Mexico again. got to give them a lot of credit, man. Of course, the big news of the day today, Tom Homo stepping aside after 20 years as the BYU athletic director. His presser was earlier today, and that can be found on online certainly somewhere. And then obviously Luka Doncic and LeBron James in the building tonight. I got to say, man, asking Smitty to make tonight interesting and having him drop like, hey, they're going to play LA teams 4 straight games.
That's interesting.
After football ends and the Jazz aren't good or interesting, a couple lean weeks may lie ahead here.
Yeah, we'll look ahead to NFL draft, spring football stuff, but yeah, for now we're relying on the Utah Jazz, RSL preseason, and Utah Hockey Club stuff, at least here locally. Of course, there'll be some sports stories that'll pop up here and there, but yeah, like you said, we'll be searching for stuff, and we'll find it and bring you some fun radio.
Look at you dropping a little RSL preseason.
There we go. Today.
They did. They had a battle today against the New York Red Bulls where they drew 3-3. I don't know anything else about it. Looks like Diogo scored. Shout out to Diogo. I need to get to know these players. Somebody named Forrester scored twice, a new striker. So I'll learn more about the new RSL players.
Kurt Schmidt can tell you tomorrow.
Nice. Okay, well, that'll do it. Utah women's basketball coming up next. So in addition to Kurt Schmidt stopping by on a Thursday, Porter, what else comes our way?
Kurt Schmidt, of course, RSL, and we'll go from there with him. Chris Kamrani stops by on a Thursday. We'll chat with CK in studio for an entire hour as we are on remote on Friday. We'll chat with Zach Harper, the NBA Daily Assist, push back a day for his availability, and we may check with one Dave McMiniman, who's on site for Lakers and Jazz tonight.
I think CK just did a very hipster Joshua Tree trip with his wife,
yes,
Amanda, so that's exciting for them. And that'll be exciting for us to catch up with him on a Thursday show. But that'll do it for us today. Special thank you to Mike Yam, Neil Smith, Sean Syed, and Richard Smith. For any of the sound you may have missed from the show today, check out the website. It's ESPN700sports.com. Make sure to download our mobile app and take us on the go. ESPN 700 app available in the App Store and the Google Play Store. And then for what we do in our space, 4 hours every afternoon, you can pick and choose which parts of the show you want to listen to. If we're not talking about the thing you want to hear about, go to our podcast page. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. That's available wherever you get your shows. Subscribe, rate, review, say nice things, give us all the stars. It helps. For Porter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Utah women's hoops against Colorado coming up on the other side right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network.